Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step into a town in the year 1400 where the streets smell of wood smoke, damp wool, horse dung, and bread that somehow never seems meant for you. Somewhere beyond the market square, past the stalls and the church bell and the little knots of people pretending not to stare, there is a house almost everyone knows and almost no one approaches willingly. It belongs to the executioner, which is unfortunate, because tonight, that is you. You probably won't survive this socially, which in medieval terms is almost as serious as not surviving it physically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, and let the town gate open in the cold grey light before dawn. You arrive while the sky is still undecided. Not night, not morning, only that pale, bruised hour when rooftops are black shapes against a slow, brightening east. The road beneath your boots is packed hard from carts, feet, hooves, and yesterday's rain. In the ruts, thin ice has formed, cloudy and brittle. It cracks softly under your step with the small accusing sound of something that was not ready to be disturbed. Ahead, the town wall rises from the mist. It is not the towering fantasy wall of a storybook castle, all clean stone and handsome banners. It is patched, stained, practical, and tired. A wall like an old guard who has seen too much and no longer bothers to stand straight unless important company is coming. The gatehouse smells of cold iron, wet straw, and men who have spent the night wrapped in cloaks beside a smoky brazier. One guard watches you approach. He recognizes you before your face is clear. That is one of the first things you learn in this life. People recognize you from farther away than you recognize them. They know your walk. They know your coat. They know the direction from which you come. They know the little space that opens around you without anyone deciding to open it. It is not magic, though people will sometimes speak of you as if you carry something magical and spoiled. It is habit. A town is a great machine for sorting people, and by 1400 it has learned exactly where to put you. Not inside polite society, not outside the law, somewhere worse and more useful. You pass under the gate. The guard does not quite greet you. He makes a sound that might be a cough, or might be your name swallowed before it becomes too friendly. His hand tightens around his spear shaft, not because he fears you will attack him, but because bodies do odd things near discomfort. His eyes slide toward the bundle you carry. It is wrapped in leather, darkened by oil and weather. Tools, perhaps, or rope, or nothing at all. It hardly matters. People imagine enough for you. A mainstream historical truth sits quietly beneath this morning in many medieval European towns. The executioner was an official servant of justice, paid or authorized by civic or lordly authorities, yet often treated as dishonorable because his work involved death, punishment, and the handling of bodies. Necessary. Yes. Welcome. No. Medieval society could be very efficient about needing a person and despising him at exactly the same time. A charming arrangement. Really, if your idea of charm is being paid to do what no one else will touch, then being avoided for touching it. The street inside the gate narrows between timber-framed houses whose upper floors lean forward as if whispering over your head. Shutters creak open. Smoke slips from roof vents. Somewhere a pig complains with impressive sincerity. A woman sweeping her threshold pauses when she sees you. The broom stops in mid-stroke. She looks down immediately, as if the dirt by her feet has become fascinating. Perhaps it has... Dirt, unlike you, is allowed to remain in public without causing moral tension. You keep walking. The town is waking in layers. First the animals, then the workers, then the bells, then the arguments. A cartwheel groans near the market. A baker's boy hurries across the lane with flour ghosting his sleeves. He nearly runs into you, then jerks aside so quickly he drops a cloth. For a moment, the cloth lies between you, white against mud. He wants it back. You can see the calculation in his face. If you pick it up, he may not want it anymore. If he picks it up, he must come too close, so you step around it. He snatches it after you pass. No one says anything. Silence is often the town's most honest language. Your house stands near the edge, where the respectable streets begin to lose interest in themselves. It may be outside the wall in some places, inside but remote in others. In certain towns, men like you live near the gallows road, the knacker's yard, the ditch, the place where waste goes, or the place where memory goes when people prefer not to look directly at it. Your dwelling is not a ruin. That would be too theatrical. It is simply marked by distance. A low fence leans around a yard. A chopping block sits near a shed, though not every block in your life is for death. Wood needs cutting too. People forget that executioners require kindling like everyone else. A dog lifts its head from the doorway and considers you with more warmth than most Christians in town can manage. Inside, perhaps, there is a wife stirring embers, or an apprentice still asleep, or a child who's already learned that other children repeat what their parents say. The air smells of ash, leather, damp rope, metal oil, and old straw. You set down the bundle. For a little while, nothing happens. This is another thing people rarely imagine. The executioner's life is not one endless parade of scaffold and screams. Much of it is waiting. Waiting for court sessions. Waiting for sentences. Waiting for officials to agree on fees. Waiting for prisoners to confess, recant, faint, pray, or simply become too tired to resist. Waiting for the town to remember that it fears you, but still needs you at noon. A curious detail, half practical and half strange, follows your profession like a shadow in some places. Executioners and their families were pushed into related unclean work, such as removing dead animals, clearing carcasses, or dealing with waste. The town might refuse your touch in the bread queue, then summon that same touch when a horse collapsed in the street. Medieval disgust had priorities, but consistency was not always one of them. You step back outside and look toward the square. The church bell sounds, not loudly at first, just a slow iron voice moving through the morning. The sound travels over roofs and yards, touches every sleeper, every pot, every animal stall, every private fear. Bells mark time here. They call people to prayer, warn of fire, announce meetings, celebrate feast days, and sometimes gather crowds to witness punishment. A bell can make a town feel like one body. Today, as it rings, you feel how that body flinches around you. You walk again, because your work is never only in the moment of punishment. Your work begins in looks, in records, in rumours, in the way the town prepares itself to believe that justice is clean because someone else has agreed to become dirty. Near the well, two women stop speaking. One holds a bucket rope, the other has a basket of laundry. Steam rises from their mouths in little clouds. They look past you rather than at you. This is a skill people develop, looking past a person so thoroughly that the person becomes a road, a post, a patch of weather. But the younger woman cannot resist a glance. Her eyes flick to your hands. Your hands are ordinary this morning. Cold, reddened knuckles, a scar near the thumb, nails dark from work no amount of washing fully removes. They could be a carpenter's hands, a butcher's hands, a soldier's hands, a farmer's hands. That is perhaps what bothers people most. Nothing on your skin proves you're a monster. The town has to keep telling itself you're different. Because if you're not different, then the work you do belongs to the same world as bread, bells, baptisms, rent and supper. And it does. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners were everywhere as socially isolated as later folklore suggests, or whether the level of exclusion varied sharply by region, city, century, and local custom, the truth, as usual, refuses to sit neatly in one little box. Some executioners married within narrow circles and lived almost as a caste. Some gained wealth and practical influence. Some were feared, mocked, needed, avoided, bribed, consulted, and occasionally protected by the very authorities that allowed everyone else to despise them. Human beings are complicated. Medieval human beings, annoyingly, were also human beings. You continue toward the square, where stalls are opening beneath patched awnings. Fish, onions, rough cloth, firewood, cheap knives, old shoes, eggs in straw. The smells overlap until the air becomes a stew of ordinary survival. A butcher lifts a cleaver and nods at you before he remembers not to be too friendly. There is an awkward little pause in his face, like a door closing politely but firmly. You almost smile. He cuts flesh for a living. You cut the meaning of law into public memory. Apparently this distinction matters enormously over breakfast. A child stares at you from behind a barrel. His eyes are wide, not yet trained into adult avoidance. Someone pulls him back by the shoulder. The message is clear. Do not look. Do not ask. Do not become curious about the wrong kind of person. But curiosity is a stubborn weed. It grows through stone, through sermons, through parental fingers. The child keeps peering anyway, and you, unfortunately, keep existing. Beyond the square, the road rises slightly toward the place everyone knows is there. Even when empty, the scaffold may be temporary or permanent, depending on the town. The gallows may stand outside the walls, where travellers see it first, a warning raised against the sky. Law likes visibility. Power prefers a good view. If punishment is meant to teach, then the classroom must be public. But you do not go there yet. Not this morning. For now, you stand at the edge of the market and feel the town arrange itself around you like water around a stone. You're not noble. You're not clergy. You're not guildsman, beggar, merchant, soldier or farmer. You're the hand that appears when judgment has already been spoken. You're the door no one approaches unless the law, fear, or desperation pushes them toward it. And somewhere nearby, behind shutters and court walls and locked prison doors, the day is already moving toward you. By mid-morning the town has found its voice. Carts rattle over stones. Poultry complain from wicker cages. A cooper hammers iron hoops onto a barrel, each strike ringing bright and ordinary through the lane. Somewhere a woman laughs, then lowers her voice when you pass, as if laughter itself might become contaminated by drifting too near your shoulder. You do not turn. You have learned not to reward every silence with attention. A man in your position could spend his entire life noticing every slight, and then there would be no time left to sharpen tools, mend straps, eat soup, or sleep. You return to your yard where the leather bundle waits beside the shed. The dog noses it and loses interest. Sensible creature. Dogs do not waste energy on reputation when there are smells to investigate. Inside the house, the air is warmer, though not by much. Smoke hangs low under the rafters. A pot mutters gently over the hearth, giving off the thin comfort of onions, old bones, and barley. On a bench near the wall sits a boy of perhaps 12 or 13, long-limbed, narrow-faced, trying very hard to appear awake. He is your apprentice. He may also be your son. In many towns and regions, that difference is smaller than people like to admit. This is not the sort of craft a respectable master advertises with a painted sign and a cheerful promise. No one strolls through the market thinking, "Ah yes, perhaps young Martin should learn strangulation and civic shame. Wonderful prospects there." Your trade often moves through bloodlines because outsiders do not wish to enter it, and because insiders are not easily allowed to leave. Sons learn from fathers, nephews learn from uncles, A widow may remarry within the profession because few others will take her household without flinching. A daughter may marry another executioner's son in a neighbouring town, which is less romance than social geometry, but people have built entire lives on less. You look at the boy's hands, they're still soft in places. Not soft like nobility, of course. No one here has hands designed only for rings and pointing, but soft enough to show that the harder lessons have not yet settled into the skin. He has carried wood. He has cleaned the yard. He has seen animals slaughtered. He has learned how rope behaves when wet, how knots tighten, how iron must be kept from rust, how a blade can look clean and still need work. He has not yet stood alone before a crowd that wants justice, spectacle, and someone to blame if the weather is poor. That lesson comes later. A common historical fact, plain as the soot on the ceiling, is that medieval executioners were not always random thugs dragged from the gutter for unpleasant work. Many were trained specialists. Their duties could include hanging, beheading, branding, whipping, torture under legal authority, disposal of carcasses, and other dishonoured services assigned by the town or court. The work required practical skill. It required strength, yes, but also timing, steadiness, knowledge of tools, and a stomach trained not to rebel at the wrong moment. The town may call you polluted, but it still expects professional results. Medieval hypocrisy, as you may have noticed, comes with very high standards. Your apprentice rises as you enter. He does not ask whether there will be work today. Children in such households learn to read the shape of a day from small signs, the visit of a clerk, the mood of a guard, the bell pattern, the arrival of a priest walking too quickly toward the prison, the way neighbours stop pretending not to know anything. He has already seen the leather bundle by the shed. He knows it was not moved for decoration. You gesture toward the bench. He sits again. There is bread on the table, dark and coarse, with a crack in the crust like frozen earth. He cuts it carefully. Not because the knife is precious, though it is, but because bread is never just food in a household like yours. It is proof that the town can despise you and still pay you just enough to keep breathing. It is also proof that your family must buy from people who may not want your coin. Some bakers prefer to drop loaves onto a board rather than place them into your hand. Some take payment with 2 fingers, as if your money has been sneezing. The boy has seen this. He has seen you ignore it. That is also training. Not every lesson comes with tools. Some come with lowered eyes, swallowed replies, and the long discipline of not making every insult into a public matter. Respectable men may quarrel in taverns, shout at wells, shove each other near market stalls, and later reconcile over ale. You do not have that luxury. If you anger people, they will say you're dangerous. If you are quiet, they will say you're sly. If you smile, they may decide you enjoy your work too much. If you frown, they may decide guilt is finally showing. It is a narrow road, and you walk it with a town watching your feet. Across the room, hanging from a peg, is an old hood. Not the theatrical black hood of later imagination, perfectly ominous and ready for a bad painting. In many medieval executions, the executioner may not have worn any such hood at all. The hidden face belongs more to folklore, stagecraft, and later dramatic taste than to every real scaffold. Yet face coverings, distinctive clothing or marked garments did appear in some places and periods, and the idea clings because people love a symbol. A cover face makes punishment look less human. Very convenient. That, if no one has a face, no one needs to wonder about his dreams. A lesser-known oddity trailed through records and customs in scattered places. Some executioners were granted unusual privileges because their work was so shunned. They might receive portions of goods from market stalls, fees from certain punishments, old clothing from the condemned, or payment for tasks no guild wanted. In a few towns, the executioner's right to take scraps or fees became a small battlefield of resentment. Imagine being hated for doing the job, then hated again for collecting the payment. Truly, the medieval customer service experience was not ideal. The boy chews slowly. He looks toward the yard, where your tools wait unseen. Perhaps he hopes for a different future. Perhaps he's already learned not to hope too loudly. You remember being his size. You remember your own father's hands guiding yours around a knot. Not roughly, not kindly either. Simply with the practical pressure of a man teaching survival. Pull here, never there, check the fibre, wet hemp tightens, old rope lies, new rope can burn. Do not trust a knot you have not made yourself. Do not trust a crowd even when it cheers. Your father did not speak much about choice. Choice is a word that sounds larger in comfortable rooms. In a town of walls, guild rules, church bells, and inherited suspicion. Choice may be no bigger than the space between one duty and the next. If your father is the executioner, who will take you as apprentice? A goldsmith, a weaver, a respectable butcher whose wife crosses herself when your family passes. Perhaps in some towns, an exceptionally stubborn boy might flee, enlist, disappear onto the roads, or find labour where no one knows his name. But names travel, so do faces, so do accusations. Researchers still debate how rigid the hereditary nature of the office was around 1400, since evidence shifts from one region to another. In some cities, executioner families became almost dynastic, passing posts from father to son over generations. Elsewhere, the office might be filled by outsiders, condemned criminals granted grim employment, marginal men, or specialists hired from another jurisdiction. The neat picture of one cursed family line everywhere is too simple. History dislikes being neat. It prefers cupboards full of exceptions. Still, in your house, the lesson is simple enough. The boy must learn. You take the leather bundle and open it on the table. The room grows quieter, though nothing dramatic has appeared. A small knife, a whetstone, straps, a coil of cord, metal pieces wrapped in cloth, tools for maintenance more than punishment. That is what apprenticeship looks like at first. Cleaning, carrying, watching, remembering. The body learns before the heart is asked what it thinks. You hand him the whetstone. He wets it from a small bowl. The stone darkens. He draws the knife along it with a careful scrape. Too much pressure at first. You tap his wrist. He adjusts. The sound settles into a rhythm, soft and dry, like winter reeds brushing against each other. Outside, the market continues. Bells mark the hour. Someone leads a horse down the lane. Life goes on around the house of the executioner. Pretending your walls are not part of the same town. The boy works. You watch. There is tenderness in this, though no one outside would call it that. To teach a child what you know is one of the oldest forms of care. To teach him this knowledge is also a wound. You're giving him tools that may keep him fed and mark him forever. You're passing down skill, income, danger, and loneliness in one quiet morning. A trade inherited, not chosen. A life placed into the hands before the mind has fully understood its weight. He looks up once, perhaps hoping you'll say something comforting. You almost do. Instead, you show him the correct angle again. By noon, the light has strengthened, but the day has not grown warmer. It lies across the town in a pale sheet, touching roofs, barrels, puddles, and faces without softening any of them. The market is fully awake now. Voices rise and cross each other. A woman argues over the price of beans. A man selling firewood insists his bundles are larger than they look, which is the sort of statement that invites suspicion in any century. Bells have called people to prayer and then released them again into errands. Debts, hunger, gossip, and all the small business that makes a town feel alive. You stand in your yard with your coat laid across a stool. It is not an elegant garment. No one would mistake it for a noble cloak or a guildmaster's trimmed gown. The wool is heavy. dark from rain and use, and rubbed shiny at the elbows. It smells faintly of smoke, leather, and weather. A patch seam runs beneath one arm. Another repair sits near the hem, where mud has stiffened the cloth. You brush it with your palm, not because brushing helps much, but because hands like tasks when the mind has too many. Your clothing marks you before you speak, not always by law, not always in the same way, and not everywhere with the same colour or symbol. But in many towns, executioners and other dishonoured workers could be recognised through garments, tools, residence, or habit. Some communities required distinctive dress for marginal groups. Others simply knew who belonged where. A man might not need a badge if every baker, guard, child, and priest already knows his face. A reputation can be stitched more tightly than cloth. You lift the coat and put it on. The weight settles over your shoulders like a familiar sentence. There is a mainstream fact hiding in this ordinary motion. Medieval Europe was deeply status conscious, and clothing often signalled rank, occupation, respectability, wealth, and legal identity. Sumptuary rules in some places tried to control who could wear certain fabrics, colours, furs, or ornaments. Guild members, clergy, nobles, servants, widows, pilgrims, lepers, Jews in certain regions, prostitutes in certain towns, and officials of many kinds could all be visually sorted by dress, custom, or expectation. The town reads bodies like documents. Yours has been annotated in the margin with a very unflattering hand. You fasten the belt. At it hang small things people notice far too quickly. A knife in a plain sheath, keys, a leather pouch with cord, wax, and a few coins. Nothing monstrous, nothing glowing with wickedness, just tools. But tools become symbols when carried by the wrong person. A carpenter may wear a knife and seem industrious. A butcher may carry a hook and seem practical. You carry much less and make everyone remember the scaffold. It is almost impressive, really. Your apprentice watches from the doorway. He has a strip of cloth in his hands, cleaning a buckle that has no real need to shine. He looks at your coat as if studying a future he's not ready to wear. Children inherit many things quietly. A turn of speech, a way of standing, a scar on the family name. In your household, clothing becomes part of instruction. What to wear, when to appear. How to avoid looking too rich, too poor, too proud, too ashamed. The town will judge all versions, of course, but one may as well give it fewer sharp objects. Your house marks you too. It sits apart enough to be noticed and but near enough to be useful. A low roof, rough walls, a yard that holds more practical objects than decorative ones. There are hooks in the shed, coils of rope, a ladder, a cart axle waiting for repair, buckets, scraps of hide, a broken plank, a small chopping block and a barrel catching rainwater. None of it would shock anyone if found in a farmyard or workshop. Yet here, every object seems to gather meaning. Even the ladder looks guilty. Near the fence, a neighbour's child has left a small bundle of sticks. Not inside your yard, naturally, just beside the gate, where you can reach them without anyone admitting an exchange has taken place. Perhaps they are payment for a favour. Perhaps a woman in the lane asked you to remove a dead dog and did not want to knock. Perhaps someone needed a bone set, a boil lanced, or an animal dealt with, but preferred gratitude at a distance. You take the sticks and place 2 in the woodpile. Warmth has no pride. It burns what it is given. A strange little tidbit follows the reputation of executioners across parts of Europe. Some people believed objects associated with them, especially ropes, tools, or substances connected to punishment, had magical or medicinal power. That did not mean people wanted to invite the executioner for dinner. Good heavens! No, let us not become reckless, but a scrap of rope might be whispered over as a charm. and a touch from dishonoured hands might be sought for healing in certain folk practices. The same society that recoils from you may also creep to your gate at dusk asking for help. Humans are very consistent, except when they are awake. You step into the lane. The coat does its work before you do yours. A pair of boys playing with a hoop pull it aside as you pass. Their mother has trained them well, or perhaps fear trains faster than mothers. An old man seated near a doorway spits, though not quite at your feet. Precision matters in insults. Too direct, and he risks a quarrel. Too vague, and he keeps the pleasure of pretending it was nothing. You continue past him, feeling the small heat of annoyance rise and cool again. The town is a theatre of tiny distances. People do not always flee from you. That would be too dramatic and very inconvenient during market hours. Instead, they adjust. A half step to the side, a hand withdrawn from a shared bowl, a bench suddenly full, a conversation that changes shape. You're allowed to walk, buy, work, pay taxes, obey bells, and answer officials. You're not allowed to forget what you are. At the well, a woman fills her bucket. She sees you coming and pulls the rope faster. The pulley squeals. Water slaps against wood. She lifts the bucket with a grunt and nearly spills it in her haste. You could tell her that you have no interest in touching her rope, her bucket, her sleeves, her household, or her immortal soul. But people rarely appreciate being corrected while afraid, so you wait until she moves away. Then you draw water. The rope is wet and rough beneath your palm. Cold bites through the skin. You lower the bucket into darkness and listen for the hollow splash below. For a moment, the well smells of stone, moss, iron, and deep earth. It is peaceful down there. The water does not care who you are. It only reflects what leans over it. And even then, not very accurately. Scholars continue to disagree about how visibly marked executioners were in the late medieval period, because legal requirements, civic customs, and later legends tangle together like badly stored cord. Some records describe dishonourable dress or social restrictions. Some images show executioners as ordinary workmen. Later centuries added stronger stereotypes, including sinister colours, masked faces, and exaggerated costumes. So when you imagine yourself here in 1400, you must hold two truths at once. You may be marked by clothing, but you're even more marked by memory. You carry the bucket home, water swings against the wooden sides, cold drops striking your boots, a dog barks, a shutter closes. Somewhere in the market, a seller calls out fresh eels. Though fresh is doing a great deal of labour in that sentence. The smell of frying onions curls from a doorway and makes your stomach answer before your dignity can stop it. Back in the yard, your apprentice has hung a strap from a peg. He has not cleaned it properly. A dark line of old grime remains near the buckle. You point to it. He sighs, then catches himself. Sighing at instruction is a luxury, and he knows it. He scrubs again. You pour water into a basin and wash your hands. The water clouds immediately. Dirt lifts from the skin, smoke, metal dust, leather oil, ordinary life. You rub each finger carefully, then the nails, then the wrists. The gesture is almost ceremonial. You know washing will not change what people think. There is no basin deep enough for reputation. Still, the body insists on its own small truths. Clean hands are clean hands, even when the town refuses to believe in them. Your coat hangs from your shoulders. Your belt sits at your waist. Your tools rest where you can reach them. Your house stands apart, waiting. Your skin carries no visible curse, no black mark, no sign from heaven. Only scars, weather, and the tired warmth of living flesh. That may be the most unsettling thing of all. You're not a monster in a mask. You're a man in a marked coat, in a marked house, in a town that needs mark so it can tell itself where danger ends. And as the afternoon leans forward, You feel the court's messenger coming before you see him. The messenger arrives with mud on his hem and official impatience in his face. He does not enter your yard at once. Of course he does not. The gate is open, the path is clear, the dog has decided this visitor is too boring to bark at, and still the man pauses as if an invisible ditch runs between the lane and your door. He wears the short cloak of a town servant, with a small badge fixed near the shoulder. The badge gives him courage. Not enough courage to step closer than necessary, but a respectable amount. Let us not expect miracles before supper. You meet him at the fence. He clears his throat and speaks your name softly, though there is no one nearby who does not already know it. Then he tells you the court will require your attendance before evening. A sentence has been confirmed. Preparations must be made. Payment will be discussed after the duty is performed, which is exactly the sort of phrase that has cheated working people since the invention of work. You nod. The messenger looks relieved that you do not ask questions. He turns away almost too quickly, then remembers he has dignity and slows his pace. His boots slap through the mud. At the corner, he glances back once, not at your face, but at your hands. Always the hands. The town cannot seem to stop checking them, as if they might reveal whether justice feels heavy. You go inside and tell your apprentice to mind the fire. Then you step out toward the market. You need cord, oil, and perhaps a loaf if the baker has not run out of courtesy. Ordinary errands. Really, that is the problem. Nothing exposes your position more sharply than ordinary errands. On the scaffold, people know where to place you. In the market, they become confused. You're buying onions. You're standing beside them at the cheese stall. You're reaching toward the same scale, breathing the same cold air, listening to the same rooster declare himself important for the 7th time that morning. It is deeply inconvenient when a feared person needs breakfast. The lane opens into the square, and the square notices. Not all at once, more like a field of grass bending under wind. First one face turns, then another. A woman adjusts her basket. A man shifts his child to the other side of his body. 2 apprentices from the tannery smirk until their master cuffs one on the shoulder. The priest's housekeeper sees you and becomes suddenly fascinated by a cabbage. That cabbage receives more moral attention in 5 seconds than most sinners get in a week. The market is a place of touch. Coins pass from palm to palm. Bread is weighed, cloth is rubbed between fingers. Fish are lifted by their tails. Apples are squeezed by people who have no intention of buying them. Everyone touches everything. Yet when you arrive, touch becomes complicated. The baker's wife stands behind a board covered with round loaves, their crusts dark, flour still clinging in pale patches. The smell rises warm and yeasty into the cold, and your stomach tightens with the simple hope that the morning soup did not quite satisfy. You ask for 1 loaf. She reaches for it, then hesitates. There it is, a pause so small that no court could convict it, and so large that your whole life fits inside. She chooses a loaf from the far side, not the one nearest your hand. She sets it on the board. You place coins beside it. She does not take them until you have stepped back. Then she sweeps them into a little wooden bowl, not her apron pocket. Later, perhaps, she will wash them, or perhaps she will only pretend to have washed them, because fear often enjoys ritual more than hygiene. In many medieval towns, trades and guilds shaped public life, and access to them mattered deeply. Guilds guarded skill, reputation, prices, training, and social belonging. Executioners usually stood outside these honourable corporate worlds. Even when their work required expertise, a baker might be protected by a guild, a smith by a guild, a weaver by a guild, each with rules, feasts, saints, banners, and mutual aid. You have tools and training too, but no comfortable brotherhood waiting to toast your health. Your craft is official, yet not respectable. It is labour without welcome. You tuck the loaf under your arm and move to the oil cellar. He's a thin man with clever eyes and fingers stained dark from handling jars. He does not refuse you. Refusal would be foolish. The town needs you. And besides, coin is coin once it stops being symbolic and starts paying rent. But he chooses the jar himself, ties the stopper with a bit of twine, and places it on the edge of the table where you can pick it up without brushing his sleeve. This little dance repeats itself. At the butcher's stall, the butcher nods because he knows better than most that necessary work can smell unpleasant. He gives you a strip of tough meat and, perhaps out of sympathy or fear, cuts it a little larger than the price deserves. His wife notices and frowns. The butcher pretends not to see her frown. Marriage, unlike public punishment, often happens quietly and without witnesses, but its judgments can be just as severe. At the cord cellar, you inspect a length of hemp. The fibres are coarse under your thumb, twisted tightly, slightly stiff from the damp. You test its give. The seller looks away. He does not like watching you judge rope. Rope in his hands means carts, bundles, animals, wells, barrels, boats, roof repairs. Rope in your hands begins to remember other meanings. The material has not changed. Only the story around it has. A small and rather strange detail from some European customs is that executioners could be denied normal contact at communal places, yet still be asked to perform tasks requiring intimate trust. People might not drink beside you, but they might come secretly to have a dislocated joint set or an animal put down. They might refuse your hand in daylight and knock at your shutter after dusk, so the market turns its back publicly, while private need sneaks through the side door with its hood up. Very dignified, naturally. Near the well, a priest passes with a clerk. The priest gives you a brief nod. It is not warm, not hostile, simply official. He too lives with uneasy boundaries. He may stand beside the condemned, hear confession, urge repentance, and remind the crowd that justice belongs to God and the law. He may also prefer not to share a cup with you afterward. People can build a remarkable number of little fences inside one conscience. A child asks loudly, "Is that him?" The square tightens. His mother pulls him back so hard his wooden shoe scrapes the ground. "Hush," she says, though the word is sharper than silence and draws more attention than the question did. You do not look at them. The child has done nothing wrong. Children name what adults decorate with avoidance. Is that him? Yes. It is him. The man with the loaf. The man with the oil. The man who will be called when the sentence must become real. There is still disagreement among historians about whether townspeople felt more disgust, fear, fascination, or practical dependence toward executioners, because surviving records show behavior more clearly than emotions. Court accounts tell us payments. Civic rules tell us restrictions. Moral writings tell us what people claim to believe. But the sideways glance in the market, the held breath at the stall, the child yanked backward from curiosity, these must be reconstructed carefully. The past left paperwork. It did not leave every heartbeat. You pass the tavern. Inside, voices rise over cups. Smoke presses against the shutters. Someone is singing badly, which is one of humanity's most durable traditions. There is a bench near the door where tradesmen sit in better weather, their backs to the wall, their legs stretched into public importance. Today one man sees you through the open doorway. He stops singing, another turns. The tavern keeper suddenly busies himself wiping a cup that was already clean enough for any honest mouth. You do not enter. Not because you're forbidden today. Not exactly. The rules may be written, or they may only exist in everyone's bones. You could step inside, buy ale, and force the room to decide what it believes. But why spend coin to drink hostility from a cup your own house has thin ale, and the dog offers better conversation? So you continue. The market resumes behind you, louder than before. as if noise can cover the shape your passing left. Bargaining returns. The rooster renews his campaign. A woman laughs again, this time too brightly. You carry bread, oil, cord, and the familiar invisible weight of 100 small refusals. By the time you reach your gate, the apprentice is waiting in the yard. He sees the loaf first, then the cord. His face changes, just a little. He understands the day now. The market has turned its back, but the court has opened its hand. One side will not touch you, the other will summon you. Between them, you stand with your purchases in the cold, preparing to do what everyone has decided must be done by someone else. By late afternoon, the square has begun to change its shape. It is still the same square. Technically, the same well, the same stalls, the same leaning houses with smoke breathing from roof holes, the same muddy corners where chickens scratch as if they have urgent legal business of their own. But the air is different now. It has tightened. People move with a little more purpose and a little less honesty, because no one wants to admit they are making time to watch. A scaffold changes a town before anyone climbs it. Men from the town crew have brought planks and trestles to the open space near the market cross. The wood is rough, dark, and damp at the edges. It smells of rain, sap, mud, and old storage. A ladder lies on the ground beside it. 2 boys linger too close until one of the workmen snaps at them to go home, which of course makes them retreat only far enough to continue watching with improved strategy. Children are excellent students of forbidden things. You arrive with your apprentice carrying part of the bundle. The market sees you again, but this time no one pretends not to understand why you're here. The baker's wife does not look at your loaf now. The butcher stops sharpening his knife. A seller of pins closes her hand around her tray, not because you would steal from her, but because anxiety likes to hold something. The priest stands near the church porch with a clerk beside him. A town official in a fur-lined cap speaks with the sergeant. Everyone has a role. Everyone would like to believe the role protects them from the meaning of the day. You set your bundle beside the scaffold. The apprentice kneels to untie it, fingers moving carefully. You do not hurry him. Haste is for messengers and fools. A crowd can smell uncertainty. It may not understand technique, but it understands nervous hands. So you move slowly. You check the ladder. You check the beam. You test the platform boards with your boot. One plank gives a little, and you tell the workman to wedge it tighter. He grumbles, because workmen have grumbled since the first person asked another person to fix something properly. Still, he fixes it. The law requires a stage because punishment here is not private. In much of medieval Europe, executions and corporal punishments were public acts meant to display authority, confirm the sentence, warn the community, and restore an injured social order. A judgment hidden in a room could punish a body. A judgment performed before witnesses could teach everyone else where power stood. This was not entertainment only, though some certainly treated it that way. It was ceremony, warning, theatre, and administration all standing on the same boards. A town crier steps into the square. His voice is strong enough to survive poor weather, which is useful, since poor weather attends justice with suspicious enthusiasm. He announces the condemned person's name, crime, and sentence. The words strike the square and ripple outward. Theft, murder, treason, arson, coin clipping, heresy. The exact offence depends on the day, the court, the region, and the temper of those with authority. Today, the crime is serious enough to bring the crowd, serious enough to bring you, serious enough to make every mother nearby hold her child's shoulder a little tighter. People lean in. They should not enjoy this. They tell themselves. Many do not. Some come because absence would be noticed. Some come because the law expects witnesses. Some come because fear tastes better when shared. Some come because boredom is a powerful engine. And some come because In a world without newspapers, photographs, cinema, or that dreadful glowing rectangle people in later centuries carry everywhere, public punishment is one of the great spectacles of civic life. Not a pleasant thought, perhaps, but history does not become kinder because we lower the lamps. You stand at the scaffold's edge. The wood is damp beneath your palm. A splinter catches your skin. You remove it with your teeth and spit it away. Around you, the crowd keeps widening. Tradesmen in aprons, women with baskets, beggars near the edge where they can slip away quickly, boys perched on barrels, a few older people who have seen enough of these days to know where to stand for the best view without being pressed too tightly. Experience has many forms. Not all of them are noble. An odd custom appears in some records and traditions. People sometimes treated the final words or behaviour of the condemned as meaningful beyond the legal sentence itself. A calm death might be remembered as a sign of repentance or courage. A curse, confession, prayer, or refusal could travel through town as gossip before evening. The crowd did not only watch the punishment, it watched for a story. Even at the edge of death, people wanted interpretation. Medieval public life was basically one long argument with witnesses. The prisoner is not here yet. That absence fills the square more than his presence would. While waiting, the crowd studies you. It always does. A punishment is officially about the condemned, but before the condemned arrives, you are the most interesting discomfort available. People inspect your coat, your belt, the shape of your shoulders, the calmness of your face. They want you skilled but not eager, firm but not cruel, invisible but completely reliable, a modest request. Really, please carry society's violence in your hands while also reassuring everyone that your soul has not noticed. Your apprentice stands a little behind you. You can hear his breathing, not fast, but careful. You remember your own first public day beside your father. The square seemed impossibly large, though perhaps it was smaller than this one. You remember the smell of wet wool, onions, candle wax from the priest's sleeves, and your own fear hidden under your tongue like a coin. Your father had not comforted you. He had only said, "Watch the officials, not the crowd changes, the officials give the signal, so you watch the officials." The town judge has arrived. He's wrapped in dark cloth, with a face arranged for seriousness. Beside him stands a clerk holding documents that have already done their work. Written words brought this day into being. Depositions, accusations, testimony, confession, sentence. The scaffold is only the final paragraph. It looks more dramatic because wooden rope photograph better in memory than ink. There is some uncertainty among specialists about how different groups in a medieval crowd understood these scenes. Did they see them mostly as sacred moral drama, legal necessity, political intimidation, community cleansing, grim entertainment, or all of these at once? The answer probably changes from face to face. A widow whose purse was stolen may watch differently from a child on a barrel. A priest may watch differently from a drunk apprentice. You, standing beside the ladder, watch differently from everyone. The church bell sounds, not the bright bell of morning errands. This is slower, heavier, with space between each stroke. The sound presses the crowd into quiet. A few heads bow, some lips move in prayer. Others only look toward the lane from the prison. The dog that followed you earlier has wisely remained at home. Dogs may be less sinful than humans, but they are not stupid. Then the movement begins. Guards appear first, 2 men with spears, then a clerk, then the priest, then the condemned. The crowd exhales in pieces. You do not stare too long. It is important not to make the condemned feel hunted by your eyes before the law has delivered him to your hands. He's a man, though the sentence has already begun to turn him into an example. His steps are uneven. His mouth moves around a prayer, or perhaps around nothing at all. The crowd shifts backward and forward at once. Someone mutters, someone crosses herself. A child is lifted for a better view. A vendor, unbelievably, sells hot pies at the edge of the square. The smell of meat and pastry drifts through the air, and there is something almost unbearable about it. Life does not pause because a sentence has arrived. It chews, it buys. It complains that the pie is too small. You climb the first step of the scaffold. The boards creak beneath your weight. The condemned looks up. For one instant his eyes meet yours, and the crowd disappears into a blur of wool, faces, smoke, and pale winter light. This is the strange centre of your work, not the rumour, not the market turning away, not the marked coat, not the official payment after an official delay. This moment, when law becomes a person standing close enough for you to smell cold sweat and prison straw. You reach down to help him climb. The crowd watches your hand. He takes it, and the square holds its breath. After the crowd leaves, the square looks smaller. It always does. The people drain away through lanes and under archways, carrying the scene with them in fragments. One person remembers the condemned man's prayer. Another remembers the way the judge stood with his mouth pinched tight. A third remembers that someone near the well fainted and knocked over a basket of onions, which will probably become the more popular version by nightfall. Human memory enjoys a serious event, but it loves a spilled vegetable. You remain behind. The officials depart first, because authority is very busy once its work has been witnessed. The clerk rolls up the papers. The judge speaks briefly to the sergeant. The priest lingers long enough to murmur a final prayer, then turns toward the church with his head lowered. The guards step away, visibly relieved to become ordinary men again. The town crew waits nearby, pretending they are not waiting for you to finish so they can take down the planks. Your apprentice stands beside the bundle. His face is pale, but steady. That is good. Pale is acceptable. Trembling hands are not. You give him a small nod, and he bends to gather what must be gathered. This is not the part people imagine when they tell stories. They picture the raised platform, the bell, the crowd, the awful hush, the law becoming visible. They do not picture clean-up. They do not picture damp wood, coiled rope, tools wiped with cloth, straps checked for wear, ladders carried back to sheds, and oil rubbed into iron so it does not rust before the next unhappy summons. Yet this is where much of your profession lives. In maintenance, you kneel beside the wooden chest and open it. Inside are the objects that follow you from duty to duty. Rope, folded carefully, a whetstone wrapped in cloth, a short blade for cutting cord, leather straps, a mallet, iron fittings, a small bottle of oil stoppered with wax, wooden wedges, spare pegs, a rag that has been washed so many times it has surrendered all colour. Nothing looks theatrical in the chest. Nothing glitters. Nothing announces villainy. It is only equipment, which somehow makes it worse. One widely accepted truth about medieval punishment is that executioners needed practical competence, not merely willingness. Public penalties could include hanging, beheading, branding, whipping, mutilation, burning, and the breaking wheel in some regions, though the exact method depended on law, rank, crime, locality, and period. Each tool had to be prepared, stored, and used with grim precision. A frayed rope, a dull blade, a weak ladder, or a badly placed knot could turn law into chaos. And if chaos arrived, the crowd would not blame the judge's parchment. It would blame you, naturally. The apprentice lifts a coil of rope and starts to stuff it into the chest. You stop him with one hand. No, you say quietly. He freezes. You take the rope and show him how to lay it, loop by loop, without kinks. Hemp remembers poor treatment. Damp fibres swell, twists hide weakness. A rope forced into a chest may resist when it is needed most. You run it through your fingers, feeling for rough places, thin spots, frays near the end. Your thumb finds one and pauses. Not enough to discard it perhaps, but enough to note. Again you tell him, "He does it again!" This time better. The square is not fully emptied. A few watchers remain at the edges, as they always do. People who pretend to be passing. People who have suddenly discovered important business near an empty stall. People who want to see the tools now that the worst moment is over. They would never admit it. Curiosity wears many disguises, and I was only on my way to buy turnips as one of its least convincing. You wipe the blade, not dramatically. It is not the great sword of noble executions, nor some wicked instrument from a nightmare. It is a work knife, sharp enough for cord and leather. The edge whispers against the cloth. Oil catches the fading light. You check the handle, the rivets, the balance. You've known men who treat tools roughly because their work is rough. You're not one of them. Rough work demands more care, not less. A careless executioner is a danger to the condemned, to the officials, to himself, and to the fragile story the town tells about order. A curious old belief, recorded in scattered forms across Europe, gave special power to objects used in executions. Pieces of rope, fragments of wood from a scaffold, or even dust from the execution place could be imagined as charms for luck, healing, protection, or darker purposes. People who would not meet your eyes in daylight might try to buy a bit of rope through a servant. Apparently a thing can be cursed when it touches your hand, then useful when hidden under someone's mattress. Medieval logic, like modern logic, sometimes goes out for a walk and does not return until morning. A woman in a blue hood watches from near the well. She is too far away to speak. Her gaze rests on the rope. Not on you. Not on the apprentice. The rope. You know that look. Maybe she has a sick child. Maybe a neighbour told her that a thread from such a rope can draw out fever, or ward off bad dreams, or help a horse recover from colic. Maybe she's only curious. But need makes people brave in strange directions, later. If dusk is deep enough and no one is looking, someone may knock at your gate and ask for what the whole town says it despises. You close the chest. Then you inspect the ladder. The ladder is old but serviceable, its side rails polished by many hands. You check each rung with your weight. Wood groans, but holds. One peg is loose. You point it out to the town workman, who sighs as if the ladder has personally betrayed him. He fetches a mallet. The sound of hammering returns to the square. Dull and practical, thud, 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 after the bell, after the crowd, after judgment. There is always repair. There is continuing disagreement among historians about just how standardized execution equipment was in towns around 1400. Some places likely kept official tools, scaffold parts, ladders, chains, or wheels under civic control. Others relied on the executioner's own kit, borrowed structures, or improvised arrangements. Records often mention payments for rope, wood, transport, or repairs, but they do not always tell us what the object looked like in the hand. The archive is generous with expenses and stingy with texture. So you learn from scraps, from accounts, from images, from later custom, and from the stubborn fact that every public act required material preparation. Your apprentice wipes the straps. Leather needs care. It dries, cracks, stretches, stiffens in cold, softens in damp. He rubs oil into the surface with 2 fingers, slow circles, as you taught him. The smell rises rich and animal, mixing with mud, smoke, and the faint sourness of the crowd that has gone. He avoids looking at the platform. You let him avoid it. Training is not the same as cruelty. There will be enough looking in his life. You pick up the whetstone. Its surface is dark from use, hollowed slightly in the middle. When you hold it, you remember your father's thumb pressing yours into the correct angle. You remember the scraping sound in your childhood house. The same sound your apprentice made this morning. Tools carry time, not in a magical way, though plenty of people would prefer that story. They carry time because hands repeat themselves. A craft is a set of gestures passed down until the dead continue moving inside the living. The sun lowers behind the roofs. The square cools quickly. Shadows lengthen from the market cross, from the well, from the scaffold that is already becoming ordinary wood again. A pig noses at spilled straw. A clerk returns briefly to ask whether anything remains to be recorded. You tell him no. He writes something anyway. Clerks are rarely at peace unless ink has confirmed the obvious. At last, the chest is packed, rope coiled, blade wrapped, straps oiled, wedges counted, ladder repaired, planks ready to be lifted away. The apprentice takes one handle of the chest, and you take the other, together. You carry the tools back through the thinning square. People step aside with the same old half movement. Not fleeing, not welcoming, making room for the man who keeps the town's harshest objects quietly sharp. Behind you, the workmen begin to dismantle the platform. Board by board, the stage disappears. But the tools remain with you. The prison waits below the town like a bad thought. Not always literally below, of course. Some jails sit in gate towers, some in castle rooms, some beneath town halls, some in cellars where stone sweats even in summer. This one lies behind a heavy door near the court building, half sunk into the colder part of the town's body. By the time you reach it, evening has thickened. The market is folding itself away. Stalls are closing. Shutters are being fastened. Smoke hangs low between the houses, and the smell of supper drifts out in little unfair promises. You walk with a sergeant, your apprentice, and a guard carrying a lantern. The lantern light swings across the lane. It turns puddles gold for a moment, then lets them go dark again. Your chest of tools has been carried home, but you still have cord, a small knife, and the habits of the day with you. Habits are harder to put down than wood and iron. Your shoulders feel the weight of the crowd even after the square is emptied. Your hands remember their tasks. Your ears still hold that deep silence from the scaffold, the one that arrives when hundreds of people stop pretending they came only because the law required it. At the prison door, the guard knocks. A bolt slides back from within. The sound is thick, metallic, and final. The door opens just wide enough to admit bodies one at a time, because old doors understand distrust. Warm air does not come out, only a deeper cold, damp and sour mixed with straw, stale breath, old urine, mould, and the exhausted smoke of a torch burning badly somewhere inside. Charming place. Really, very restful, if your idea of rest is being stored like a sack of turnips with legal consequences. You step in. The door closes behind you. The jailer is a broad man with a red nose and eyes that look both sleepy and watchful. He has keys at his belt, large iron things that clank when he moves. Keys are part tool, part announcement. Every step he takes says, "I decide who stays where." He nods to the sergeant, glances at you, then looks away with practiced indifference. Jailer and executioner share a narrow border. Both handle people after judgment begins its work. Both are necessary. Both smell of unpleasant rooms. Yet even he keeps a small distance from you, because every hierarchy needs someone lower, and he has clearly voted. The corridor is low, your head nearly brushes the ceiling beam. The walls shine with moisture. Straw has been scattered over packed earth and stone, but it does not soften much. It only adds a faint barnyard smell to misery, which is not the improvement someone once hoped it would be. From behind one door comes a cough, from another, a mutter. Somewhere a chain shifts. The sound is small, but in the narrow passage it seems to move through your ribs. A solid point from the surviving records is that medieval prisons were often not intended as long-term punishment in the modern sense. They held people awaiting trial, sentence, payment of debts, transfer, or execution. Conditions varied widely, but confinement could be harsh, crowded, cold, expensive for the prisoner, and deeply dependent on local arrangements. In other words, prison was not always the punishment. It was the waiting room, and the waiting room, because history enjoys being bleakly efficient, could still ruin a life before any formal penalty arrived. The jailer leads you to the far cell. The condemned man is there. He sits on a low bench, wrapped in a cloak someone has given him, perhaps a relative, perhaps the priest, perhaps a guard who will deny the softness later. His hair is damp at the temples. His face has the strange looseness of a person who has slept badly or not at all. When the lantern enters, he looks up. He sees the sergeant, the jailer, the priest already standing in shadow near the wall. Then you. His eyes stop. There is no hatred in them at first, only recognition, not of you as a person perhaps, but of the next step. The priest murmurs something gentle. The condemned man's hands tighten in the cloak. You stay near the door. It is important not to crowd him. The room is already crowded with fear, authority, damp straw, and whatever private memories have followed him into this place. A man does not need one more body leaning over him. The sergeant explains what must happen before dawn, not the sentence. That has been explained, argued, sealed, witnessed, repeated, and prayed over. What remains is procedure, the time, the route, the presence of clergy, the final chance for confession, the handling of belongings, the question of whether family may see him. The jailer says no. Too late. The priest says perhaps a message can be carried. The sergeant frowns because mercy is always more troublesome in paperwork than severity. You listen. Listening is part of your work too. You need to know whether the condemned can walk, whether he is restrained, whether he is likely to collapse, fight, plead, freeze, or go numb. You need to understand the mood of the guards. You need to know if the crowd expected tomorrow will be large. Technical matters. Yes. Human matters too. Your task begins before your hands touch anything. A strange little detail from some late medieval and early modern customs is that prisoners might be offered drink, food, confession, or ritual gestures before execution, depending on place and circumstance. In some towns, the final cup became part of local tradition. Elsewhere, charitable groups assisted the condemned, praying with them or helping arrange burial, not because society had suddenly become cuddly, let us not get carried away, but because even harsh justice existed inside a Christian world concerned with repentance, spectacle, and the soul's final direction. The condemned man asks for water. The jailer looks annoyed, as if thirst has broken regulations. The priest gives him a cup. The man drinks with both hands, slowly, like someone trying to remember the taste of being alive. A drop runs down his chin. He wipes it with his sleeve. Nobody laughs. Even guards know when laughter would sound too small. Your apprentice stands behind you in the corridor. He has not entered the cell. Good. There are stages to learning. The square teaches one lesson. The prison teaches another. In the square, the condemned belongs partly to the crowd, already turned into warning, story, moral example. Here, in the damp, with one cup of water and straw stuck to his shoe, he's harder to turn into anything except a frightened man. That is why many people prefer the crowd. Crowds make abstraction easier. The evidence remains debated over how often executioners met prisoners in advance, and how much of this preparation fell to jailers, priests, guards, or civic officers. Records are rarely written to preserve awkward human proximity. They note fees, chains, candles, rope, wood, meals, and sometimes confessions. They do not always tell us whether the executioner stood in the doorway while a man asked for water, but the work required coordination, and coordination requires bodies in rooms. So you stand here. In the room, history often leaves dim. The priest begins to pray. His voice is low, steady, almost sleepy. Latin folds into the stone. The condemned man bows his head. The jailer shifts his keys to silence them. Outside the cell, your apprentice breathes through his mouth. Probably because of the smell, he will learn not to show it. Everyone learns. The nose is honest for only so long before discipline gets involved. You look at the floor. A scrap of straw clings to your boot. Water gathers between stones. The lantern flame leans and straightens, disturbed by draughts you cannot feel. Somewhere above, the town is settling into sleep. Bowls are being washed. Children are being told to stop whispering. Doors are barred. Dogs circle twice and lie down. The same town that watched judgment in the square now pulls blankets to its chin and leaves the rest to those who must stay awake. The condemned man asks whether it will be quick. The question is not loud. It does not need to be. The sergeant looks at you. No. The priest looks at you. The jailer looks at the wall. Your apprentice in the corridor becomes very still. You answer simply. Yes, if you stand steady. It is not comfort exactly. It is not cruelty either. It is the truth you can offer. You do not promise salvation. You do not promise courage. You do not promise that the crowd will be kind, because that would be absurd, and even bedtime history has limits. You promise only your skill, which is the one mercy your dishonoured hands are allowed to carry. The condemned man nods. The priest resumes his prayer, and before dawn, the prison keeps breathing around you, cold and damp and patient, holding all of you in its stone mouth. Before dawn, mercy looks nothing like softness. It looks like a checked knot, a steady voice, a ladder placed at the correct angle, a guard told not to shove, a priest given enough room to finish the prayer, and your own hands doing exactly what they must do without panic, pride, or showmanship. It is not the mercy sung about in church, all golden light and clean robes. It is work mercy, mud mercy, rope mercy, the kind that arrives in a cold lane while the town is still rubbing sleep from its eyes. The prison door opens into a blue-grey morning. The air outside feels almost sharp enough to cut bread. Frost lies thin on the stones, chimneys are beginning to breathe, and the first smoke of the day hangs low, smelling of damp wood and reluctant fires. Somewhere a cock crows with magnificent confidence, as if he has personally arranged the sunrise. The condemned man steps out between two guards, his legs hold, though only just. The priest walks near him, murmuring words that steam faintly in the cold. You walk behind, not too close, close enough. Your apprentice follows with the smaller bundle, his face set in that careful expression young people use when they want to appear older than their fear. The sergeant leads. The jailer remains at the door, keys in hand, already half turned back toward his smaller kingdom of locks and straw. The procession begins quietly, though quiet never lasts long in a town. A shutter cracks open, then another. A woman's face appears behind a cloth. A boy slips from a doorway and is caught by his father before he reaches the lane. News travels faster than feet. By the time you near the square, the crowd is waiting, smaller than yesterday perhaps, because dawn asks a price from curiosity, but still large enough. People stand wrapped in cloaks and shawls, breath rising like little ghosts. Some are silent. Some whisper. A man eats from a heel of bread and then looks ashamed of chewing, which does not stop him from taking another bite. The scaffold has been rebuilt or readied again. Damp boards dark under the cold light. The ladder leans where it should. The officials stand in place. The law is awake. One dependable fact from medieval criminal justice is that the executioner's skill mattered not only for efficiency, but for the perceived legitimacy of punishment. A botched penalty could horrify witnesses, inflame anger, dishonor authorities, and deepen suffering beyond what the sentence formally required. In a world that saw public justice as moral instruction, a clumsy hand could make the whole lesson look corrupt. The crowd might come for warning, closure, fear, or spectacle, but it expected competence. Even cruelty had rules, which is a sentence that should probably make everyone stare quietly at the ceiling for a moment. You climb the scaffold first. The boards are slick with frost. You test your footing. Your apprentice places the bundle down and steps back. The condemned man is guided up. He stumbles at the second rung, and a murmur passes through the crowd. You reach out and steady his elbow. Just that. No tenderness displayed, no drama. The grip is firm enough to help, brief enough not to embarrass him. He looks at you once, and in his eyes you see that old question from the prison. Will it be quick? You answer now by moving carefully. The priest comes close for the final prayer. His voice is low, and the crowd leans without meaning to. The condemned man repeats what he can. Some words catch in his throat, others come clearly. You keep your gaze on the work. This is not indifference. It is the opposite. If you let the crowd, the prayer, the cold, the fear, or your own imagination take hold, your hands may lose the clean path they need. A good executioner cannot afford too much feeling at the wrong second. He also cannot afford too little, and he becomes careless. Too much, and he becomes useless. A peculiar custom reported in different forms across Europe was that some condemned people were expected or encouraged to forgive the executioner before death. Sometimes this was formal, sometimes informal, sometimes more wished for than recorded. The idea made spiritual sense in a Christian culture concerned with confession, repentance, and reconciliation. It also placed everyone in a very awkward little play. The man who must die forgives the man who must kill him, while the town watches and feels briefly improved. Humanity has always enjoyed arranging moral furniture neatly around unbearable things. Today, no formal forgiveness comes, only a breath. The condemned man whispers, "Do it well." No one else hears. Or if they do, they pretend not to. You give the smallest nod. That is all the ceremony you can afford. You prepare him. The details stay simple, controlled, and private within the public gaze. You adjust what must be adjusted. You check the placement. You watch his knees, his shoulders, the angle of his head, the movement of the guards, the signal from the official. You tell him once, softly, to stand still. Not because stillness is easy, because stillness helps. The crowd fades again into wool, smoke, eyes, and breath. The official raises his hand. The priest finishes. You act, and the important thing, the only thing that matters in that instant, is that it is done without prolonging fear. The crowd makes a sound, not a scream exactly, not a sigh exactly. A single creature with many throats remembering it has lungs. A woman crosses herself. A man looks down. A child begins to cry and is hushed with desperate speed. The official lowers his hand. The priest bows his head. Your own face remains still. That stillness is part of the job too. If you look shaken, the crowd may turn. If you look pleased, it may hate you even more. If you look bored, it may decide you're inhuman. So you wear the careful mask of someone doing a hard task properly. Not a hood, not a villain's grin, just a face trained into weather. Experts continue to differ over how medieval communities judged the executioner's moral responsibility. Was he merely an instrument of lawful authority, like the sword in a judge's metaphor? Was he personally tainted by the physical act? Regardless of legal permission, did people pity him, fear him, resent him, or secretly admire his steadiness. The record gives no single answer. Law might authorize you. Theology might complicate you. Neighbors might avoid you. A condemned man might ask you for mercy in the only form you can give. And that is the strange heart of it. You cannot spare him. You can only not fail him. Afterward, the square begins its uneasy return to life. The officials speak, the clerk writes, the priest prays, the guards hold the line. Your apprentice stares at the bundle until you quietly tell him to look at the straps instead. Tasks help the young. Tasks help everyone. A strap can be cleaned, a knot can be checked, a cloth can be folded. The mind, given no task, wanders into rooms where it may not be ready to sleep. You gather the tools. A man at the edge of the crowd spits, but weakly, as if even insult feels tired. Another man nods once in your direction, then pretends he was only stretching his neck. The baker's wife is not here, or perhaps she's hidden behind taller shoulders. A beggar mutters a prayer for the dead, then asks someone for a coin in the same breath. Life stitches itself together quickly because it must. If it stopped for every sorrow, the whole town would freeze in place. You step down from the scaffold. Your boot touches the muddy square. The apprentice follows. His hands are steadier now, or perhaps numb. The cold has reddened his ears. He says nothing. You say nothing back. Some lessons cannot be discussed while the boards still creak behind you. As you carry the bundle home, the town parts again. Same distance, same glances, same old fear, but for a brief moment, beneath all that suspicion, there is another thing. Not gratitude exactly. Gratitude would be far too generous for this square. Perhaps recognition. The sentence was hard. The morning was harder. Your hands did not make it worse. In your profession, that may be the nearest mercy comes. By the time the square loosens and the crowd begins to leak away, the body has become more than a body. It is evidence, warning, sorrow, property, relic. Perhaps, if rumour grows bold enough, a problem for officials, a wound for family, a lesson for neighbours, a final duty for the priest, and another task for you. The condemned man has crossed the line everyone came to watch, but the living remain, and the living have paperwork, customs, fears, and very strong opinions about what should happen next. This is where the town's certainty becomes less certain. Before the sentence, everything seemed clear enough. The court spoke, the clerk wrote, the scaffold stood, the bell rang, the crowd gathered. You acted, but after judgment has been performed, questions unfold like damp cloth. How long should the body remain visible? May the family claim it? Does the crime require public display beyond the execution itself? Should burial be allowed in consecrated ground? Should the clothing be removed as a fee, returned as charity, or burned because people are excellent at turning cloth into argument? The dead are quiet. Everyone else is not. You stand near the platform while the officials confer. The air smells of trampled mud, cold sweat, extinguished torch smoke, and the faint greasy sweetness of pies from the vendor who has somehow decided that appetite and mortality make fine neighbours. The priest keeps his eyes lowered. The clerk, with ink stiffening in the cold, scratches notes onto a tablet before committing them to cleaner parchment later. The sergeant rubs his hands together. Whether from cold or impatience, it is hard to say. Authority has many faces, and one of them is a man wanting breakfast. You wait for instruction. That is important. You do not decide the fate of the body. Not in principle. You may handle it, move it, guard it, lower it, raise it elsewhere, or prepare it for whatever the sentence commands. But the order belongs to others. The law uses your hands, then lets those hands carry the stain. A reliable detail from medieval legal practice is that the treatment of bodies after execution varied by crime, rank, region, and sentence. Some were buried quickly, Some were left displayed as warnings along roads or at town gates. Some were denied ordinary burial. In cases of treason or severe crimes, bodies might be divided or displayed in ways meant to extend punishment beyond death. For many lesser executions, however, practical arrangements could be simpler, shaped by local custom, weather, family requests, and the patience of officials who would very much like the day to end. Today, the order is modest by the standards of the age. The body is to remain until the next bell, then be taken down. Burial will be discussed with the priest and court. A relative waits somewhere beyond the crowd, not close enough to cause a scene, not far enough to pretend this is not her grief. You noticed her earlier. A woman with a brown hood, both hands locked around a rosary. She did not cry loudly. Loud grief belongs to people who still believe the world can be persuaded. Her grief has already understood the answer. Your apprentice stands beside the chest. He looks at the body only when he must. That is enough. You give him quiet tasks, fold the cloth, count the straps, keep the knife wrapped, move the bucket aside. Work is a narrow bridge over thoughts that would otherwise drop straight into dark water. The priest approaches you. He asks whether the body can be lowered carefully when the time comes. His voice is soft, but not sentimental. He has likely seen enough dying to know that softness and seriousness are not the same thing. You say yes. He nods. For a moment, you stand close enough to smell wax in his sleeves, wine on his breath from morning mass, and damp wool from his cloak. He does not step away as quickly as others do. Perhaps faith gives him discipline. Perhaps his office requires it. Perhaps he's simply tired. The waiting hour stretches. People drift back to look. Not the full crowd now, but fragments. A man pretending to examine the market cross. A woman carrying a basket much too slowly. Two apprentices who whisper until the sergeant threatens to box their ears. They want to see the aftermath, but not be seen seeing it. This is a common human arrangement. Curiosity likes a curtain. In some places, strange beliefs attach themselves to the bodies of the executed. A touch from the dead hand might be imagined to cure illness. Blood, hair, fat, rope, or scraps of clothing could be sought for folk remedies or charms in later medieval and early modern Europe. This sounds bizarre to modern ears, unless one remembers that desperate people have always searched the edges of official religion and learned medicine for anything that promises relief. The same dead man feared as a criminal could become, in whispers, a source of healing power. Humanity rarely wastes a symbol. You see the woman in the brown hood speak to the priest. The priest listens. The sergeant frowns. The clerk writes something else, because clerks approach emotion as a problem that may be reduced by ink. You cannot hear the words, but you can guess. Burial, clothing, a prayer, a chance to touch his hand before he's taken away. Whether such things are allowed depends on the sentence, the mood of authority, and the size of the trouble they think mercy may cause. After the bell, you climb the platform again. The square has become very quiet. The officials watch. The woman in the brown hood stands near the church porch, held upright by another woman. Your apprentice remains below with the cloth ready. You move with careful slowness, not because anyone now doubts what has happened, but because roughness after death feels different. Earlier, speed was mercy. Now, gentleness is, you do what must be done. No spectacle, no flourish. The body is lowered, wrapped, and placed where the priest indicates. Your apprentice helps, though his hands tremble once when the weight shifts. You steady him with a glance, not a reprimand. The dead are heavier than imagination. So is adulthood. The woman comes forward only when allowed. She kneels beside the wrapped form. Her hand rests on the cloth where a shoulder might be. She says something too low for you to hear. The priest makes the sign of the cross. The sergeant looks away, suddenly interested in the weather. Even hard men sometimes give grief the courtesy of not staring at it. The question of who could claim executed bodies remains a matter of regional and legal variation, and the surviving evidence can be frustratingly uneven. Researchers still debate how often families successfully recovered remains, how frequently display was imposed, and how much local clergy could influence burial. Law codes give one view, civic accounts give another. Narrative sources add drama. Everyday mercy may have slipped between all three, leaving only a faint pressure in the record. You gather what remains of your work, not the body now. That passes into other hands, at least for the moment. You collect the cloths, the ties, the small things left on the platform. You check for dropped tools. A lost knife can become a rumour by sunset. A scrap of rope can become a charm before midnight. You find a short loose fibre caught on a nail and pull it free, then tuck it into your pouch to burn later. Better that than let some fool sell it as a cure for toothache. The scaffold boards are streaked with mud from many feet. A town worker sprinkles sand. Another mutters about needing to scrub before market tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word lands strangely. Tomorrow there will be cabbages here. Bread, cloth, a man complaining about fish, children chasing each other around the same post where today the crowd leaned in silence. Public places have short memories because they must. If every stone kept every grief visible, no one could cross a square without drowning. You lift the chest with your apprentice. It feels heavier than before, though nothing has been added. As you leave, the woman in the brown hood is still kneeling. The priest remains beside her. The sergeant has moved away. The clerk is packing his papers. The crowd is gone enough that the square begins to hear ordinary sounds again. Hooves, buckets, a shutter closing, a baby crying somewhere indoors, outraged by a private disaster involving hunger or cold feet. You walk toward your yard. Behind you, the dead man becomes memory, record, warning, grief, and perhaps, by nightfall, rumour. Ahead of you, your own house waits with smoke at the roof and water by the door. You will wash, you will eat, you will answer no questions if you can avoid them. But your hands still feel the weight. Not guilt exactly, not innocence either. Only the difficult weight of what remains after judgment. When the crowd has gone home and someone must deal gently with the body everyone came to see, at your door after sunset, the town becomes braver. Not openly brave. Of course. Let us not give it too much credit. Daylight belongs to rules, reputations, sideways glances, and people pretending they have never needed anything from you. Night is different. Night softens the edges of pride. It lets a person pull a hood low, cross a muddy lane, knock once at the executioner's gate, and later insist to anyone who asks that they were home the entire time, mending socks like a respectable soul. The first knock comes just as your household settles. The fire has burned down to a red bed of coals. The pot is empty except for a few grains of barley clinging stubbornly to the bottom. Your apprentice sits on a stool, polishing a buckle by habit more than need. Your wife, if she is there in this version of your life, folds rough cloth near the hearth with the quiet economy of someone who knows every scrap may have another use. The dog lifts its head before anyone else hears the sound. One knock, then a pause, then another. Softer, as if the door might be persuaded to open without admitting the knocker exists. You rise, outside. The evening smells of wet earth, smoke, and cold water standing in ruts. A woman waits beyond the threshold, wrapped in a brown cloak. She does not step into the light. Her face is half hidden, but you recognize the shape of her fear. Not scaffold fear, not crowd fear, domestic fear. The kind that begins in a kitchen, a cowshed, a field, a stairwell, and grows sharper when ordinary remedies fail. My boy fell, she says. That is all. You take your cloak from the peg. The apprentice looks up. You nod for him to come. This is one of the more uncomfortable truths of your profession in many parts of Europe. Executioners and other dishonoured workers sometimes performed medical or semi-medical side work. They might set bones, treat wounds, pull teeth, dress injuries, slaughter animals, remove carcasses, or sell substances believed to heal. Official physicians could be expensive, university-trained doctors rare, surgeons and barber surgeons unevenly available, and folk healers woven into daily life. So people turned to whoever had practical knowledge of bodies, even if that person was you, especially, sometimes, if that person was you. You follow the woman through lanes that pretend not to watch. A shutter shifts. A dog barks once. Your apprentice carries a small satchel with cloth strips, oil, a knife, a wooden splint, and a little jar of salve whose ingredients are less glamorous than rumour claims. Mostly fat, herbs, and hope. Hope, conveniently, requires no license. The woman walks quickly, but not so quickly that she draws attention. Her shame and fear pull in opposite directions. She wants you there now. She also wants no one to see that you are there at all. Her house is small and close, with smoke caught under the rafters. Inside, a boy of 10 lies on a pallet, pale and furious from pain. His arm rests at a wrong angle, not grotesquely, but clearly enough. His father stands near the wall with his jaw clenched. A younger child watches from behind a stool. The room smells of rushes, sour milk, wool, and panic. There is a bowl of water on the floor. Already cold, someone has tied a cloth around the boy's wrist, because doing something feels better than doing nothing. Even when the something is not very helpful. You kneel beside him. He tries to pull away. Easy, you say. Your voice is the same one you used in the prison. Low, plain, without decoration. The father notices that and looks away. Perhaps he remembers where else such a voice is useful. Perhaps he wishes he'd sent for anyone else. But anyone else is not here, and the boy's face is wet with tears he's trying hard not to shed. Pride starts early. Very inconvenient habit. You examine the arm gently, fingers first, warmth, movement, sensation. The boy hisses when you touch near the break. You ask him whether he can feel your thumb against his palm. He nods. You ask whether he can move his fingers. He does. Barely. The mother whispers a prayer. The apprentice watches closely, eyes fixed not on the boy's suffering, but on your hands. This too is training. Not all of your inherited art belongs to death. Some of it belongs to keeping pain from getting worse. A less tidy corner of history preserves strange faith in the executioner's healing power. In later records especially, people sought hangman's grease, fragments of rope, or the touch of the executioner for ailments. Whether such beliefs were widespread in 1400 exactly depends on place and evidence. But the roots lie in a larger medieval world where medicine, religion, learn theory, household remedies, and magic did not sit in neat separate boxes. People used prayers, herbs, charms, bleeding, saints, relics, poultices, and whatever the neighbour swore had worked on her cousin's goat. You tell the father to hold the boy's shoulder. The mother grips her rosary so tightly the beads click. Your apprentice hands you the splint. The boy watches you with enormous eyes. You explain what will happen, not in detail, but enough. There will be pain, then steadiness, then binding. He should bite the folded cloth. He should not kick you if he can help it. A little humour, dry as old straw, crosses the room. The boy almost laughs, then winces. Good. Almost laughter is still breath-moving. You work quickly, no grand motion, no heroic music, just pressure, alignment. The boy's sharp cry muffled in cloth, the father flinching harder than the child, the mother turning her face toward the wall. Your apprentice passing the strip at the right moment. The bone sits better. You feel it. The boy's body releases 1 degree of terror. You bind the splint firm, not cruel. Too tight and the hand suffers. Too loose and the whole visit is useless theatre. You check his fingers again. Warm, moving, angry. Excellent signs, in their way. The father asks what he owes. There it is, the second injury. Payment, sir, not because you're greedy, because bread costs money even for dishonoured hands. Oil, cloth, splints, time, risk. And the quiet fact that tomorrow the same father may cross the street rather than greet you. He offers eggs and 2 small coins. You take 1 coin and the eggs. Not from generosity alone, from calculation. Too much payment invites resentment. Too little teaches people your work has no value. Every exchange with you must balance on a knife edge, and not even one of the interesting knives. Debate continues among historians over how to classify this healing work. Was it a true secondary profession? A survival strategy? A folk belief attached to dishonour? Or a later pattern projected backward onto earlier executioners? The answer shifts by century and region. German lands, French towns, Italian cities, and English communities did not all arrange shame in identical ways. Still, the broader pattern is believable because dishonoured workers often knew bodies in practical ways, and the respectable world has always been willing to borrow skill from people it refuses to embrace. Before leaving, you give instructions. Keep the arms still. Loosen the binding if the fingers darken or grow cold. Warm broth if they have it. No wrestling with brothers, which makes the younger child look personally offended. You say to send word if fever comes. The mother nods quickly, too grateful to hide it and too embarrassed to show it. The father opens the door. Outside, the night has deepened. You and your apprentice step back into the lane. The eggs sit warm in the satchel, wrapped in cloth. Behind you, the boy begins to cry again. Softer now, not from sharp pain but from the aftershock of it. His mother soothes him. The father closes the door without thanking you aloud. A wise decision. Perhaps. Gratitude travels poorly when neighbours are listening. Your apprentice walks beside you in silence. After a while, he asks, will they speak of it? You look at the dark houses, the smoke, the thin moon over the roof lines. Not unless it heals badly. You say, that is another little truth of your life. If your help works, it may vanish into secrecy. If it fails, it will belong to your reputation forever. The town may not credit your skill, but it will certainly remember your mistakes. Very fair. Obviously, history should have filed a complaint. Back home, you place the eggs near the hearth. Your wife counts them with 1 glance. The apprentice washes the cloth strips. You rinse your hands in cold water, watching the surface cloud with dirt, salve, and another household's fear. Today those hands lowered a body. Tonight they set a child's arm. Tomorrow someone may refuse to take bread from them. You dry them slowly. Dishonour, it turns out, does not prevent usefulness. It only makes usefulness travel after dark. Morning returns without asking whether anyone has slept well. It slips through cracks in the shutters, grey and thin, touching the bench, the hearth, the hanging coats, the bundled tools, the eggs earned in secret, and the child's wooden cup left near the ashes, outside. The town begins again with its usual confidence. A cartwheel complains. A neighbour coughs. Somewhere a rooster, having failed to learn humility from yesterday, announces the dawn as if hired by heaven. Inside your house, life is smaller and more honest. The fire needs coaxing. The water bucket is half empty. The apprentice has left a strip of cloth soaking too long in the basin, and now it smells faintly sour. Your wife notices before you do. She lifts it with 2 fingers, gives him a look sharp enough to trim candles, and tells him to rinse it properly. He obeys without argument. Wise boy. The scaffold may frighten him, but no apprentice truly understands danger until a household woman has reached the end of her patience before breakfast. A younger child sits near the hearth, wrapped in a blanket. Not every executioner had a wife, children, apprentice, and dog arranged like figures in a moral painting, of course. Lives varied, as lives insist on doing. But families did form around this work, and that fact matters. The executioner was not only the dark figure at the edge of the crowd, he was also someone's husband, father, son, brother, neighbour of a sort, debtor, creditor, patient, nuisance, and source of winter smoke. A household stood behind the feared name, and the household bore part of the mark. The child watches you wash your hands. Again, you washed last night. You washed after the scaffold. You washed after setting the boy's arm. You wash now because breakfast is coming, because dirt gathers, because habit settles into the body, the child asks, with the direct cruelty of innocence. Do they still hate us if you're clean? The room becomes very quiet. Your wife turns from the hearth, but does not answer. The apprentice stares into the basin as if the secrets of theology may be floating beside the cloth. You dry your hands on a rough towel and take a moment. Children ask questions adults spend whole institutions avoiding. Priests, courts, guilds, families, neighbours, all arranging complicated reasons. And then one child in a blanket asks the simple version before porridge. Yes, you say gently, but less loudly indoors. The child considers this. It is not a satisfying answer, but few true ones are. A household like yours runs on ordinary labour with extraordinary caution. Bread must be bought, wood stacked, clothes mended, tools cleaned, accounts remembered, animals fed if you have them, and doors watched. Your wife may keep the household ledger, bargain at a distance in the market, manage payments, treat small wounds, prepare salves, wash linens, and decide which visitors are desperate enough to admit. If neighbours avoid the front door, business finds the back. If respectable wives refuse to share a bench with her, they may still send a servant for help when fever, childbirth, injury, or a dead animal makes respectability less useful than skill. It is worth remembering that in many medieval towns, family identity could be tied tightly to occupation. Guild households, merchant households, clerical households, farming households, and artisan families all passed work, reputation, tools, and contacts between generations. Your household does the same, only with a heavier shadow. Where a baker's child smells of flour and yeast, yours smells of smoke, leather oil, and the uneasy trade of punishment. Where a smith's child hears praise for strong arms, yours hears whispers about cursed hands. The little one reaches for bread. Your wife breaks it evenly. No one in this house is careless with portions. The loaf from yesterday has hardened at the edges, but it is still good dipped in warm broth. The eggs from the healed boy's family sit in a bowl like small pale moons. Your wife taps one against the side of the pot. The crack is satisfyingly delicate. For a moment, the room is all breakfast sounds, shell breaking, fire shifting, spoon scraping, a child sniffing because steam is too hot and hunger is impatient. This is the part the town refuses to imagine. You eat not souls, not shadows, not guilt with a spoon, barley, bread, egg if the day has been lucky. You sit on a bench that wobbles slightly. Your apprentice burns his fingers on the bowl and pretends he has not. Your wife notices and says nothing, which is one of the kinder forms of mercy. The dog rests its chin on your boot, full of hope and no moral philosophy whatsoever. A strange domestic custom appears in scattered stories about executioner families some were said to marry mainly among other executioner, knacker, grave digging, or dishonoured families, creating networks that cross towns and regions. Whether every tale is reliable is another matter, since later gossip loved to exaggerate the idea of cursed lineages. Still, Marriage records in some areas do show professional clustering among families marked by dishonourable work. Love may have been present, so was practicality. When the respectable world closes its doors, people start building corridors between the doors left open. Your wife asks about the payment from the court. You tell her it has not yet been given. She exhales through her nose. This sound contains an entire sermon on civic administration. The court summons you quickly enough when punishment must be performed. Payment travels at a gentler pace, perhaps stopping for ale along the way. You may need to remind the clerk. Politely, not too politely. A man who begs for his due may be despised. A man who demands it may be feared. You must find the narrow middle path where money appears and no one decides you have become insolent. Your wife knows this. She knows the price of oil, cord, grain, and winter. She knows which stallholders will sell to the family without making a display of disgust. She knows which children threw mud last spring and which mother apologized only after dark. She knows how to keep the household from becoming either too visible or too small to survive. The town may call you the executioner, singular, as if one man carries the office alone, but the life is shared by everyone under your roof. The apprentice finishes eating and reaches for the tool cloths. Your wife stops him. After you mend your sleeve, he looks at the tear as if it has appeared by witchcraft. It has not. It appeared because he caught it on the shed latch yesterday and hoped the universe would be too busy to report him. The universe, in this house, reports to your wife. She hands him needle and thread. His expression suggests that he would prefer another morning on the scaffold. Sensible. Perhaps. Thread can be more humiliating than rope when one is 13. You step outside for wood. The yard is cold but peaceful in its rough way. Frost has silvered the fence. The low shed door hangs crooked. A pile of split logs waits under a patch cover. Beyond the fence, a neighbour crosses the lane with a bucket. She sees you, hesitates, and gives the smallest nod. Not warmth, not welcome. A nod shaped like a crumb. You return it, in a life like yours. Crumbs are not nothing. Behind you, your family moves inside the house. You hear the child laugh at something the apprentice mutters. Your wife tells them both to be useful. The pot lid clinks, the dog barks once, then remembers that barking requires effort. These sounds gather around you more strongly than bells or crowds. The town may define you by the scaffolder, but your day is also made of splinters, broth, mended sleeves, damp socks, unpaid fees, and a child's impossible questions. The surviving evidence leaves open many questions about how executioners' families experience stigma in daily life. Did wives suffer the same avoidance as husbands? Could children play with others in some towns, but not in others? Did wealth soften the mark? Or did it only make resentment better dressed? The answer likely changed across Europe, across centuries, and even from street to street. Records name offices more easily than childhood loneliness. They count wages more readily than a woman standing alone at a well. You carry wood inside. The child has fallen asleep again. Bowl empty, blanket slipping from one shoulder. The apprentice's sleeve is badly mended but structurally hopeful. Your wife takes the logs and feeds the fire. Flame catches. Warmth spreads slowly. Touching faces, hands, tools, bread, and the low ceiling darkened by years of smoke. For a little while, no one knocks. For a little while, you're only a household behind a fence, feared together, fed together, holding close what the town keeps at arm's length. By midday, the town invites everyone to belong somewhere. That is what it seems to do. At least, the church bell calls the faithful. The Guildhall gathers men with badges, rules, and opinions polished by repetition. The tavern draws drinkers into smoky warmth. The well collects women, buckets, news, complaints, and the tiny social judgments that keep a neighbourhood alert. Even the market stalls create little islands of belonging. with sellers leaning together, buyers arguing, apprentices laughing too loudly, and children weaving through legs as if they have invented speed. You stand just outside these circles, not far outside. That would be easier, in a way, if the town banished you completely, if it placed you beyond the fields with wolves, thieves, and weather. The rules would at least be clear, but your life is more awkward than that. You're near enough to hear laughter, smell ale, see candles through windows, watch processions form, and pay the same fees everyone else resents. You're inside the wall, yet outside the table. The tavern is loud already. Its open door breathes smoke, malt, sweat, damp wool, and roasted onions into the lane. A man inside tells a story with the confidence of someone improving it as he goes. Listeners groan at the right places, cups strike wood, a stool scrapes, someone sings 2 lines of a song and forgets the third, which does not prevent him from continuing boldly into nonsense. Medieval taverns, like modern ones, understand that volume can compensate for accuracy. You pass the doorway, the tavern keeper sees you, his face becomes carefully neutral, which is worse than a frown. A frown at least admits feeling. Neutrality is a little wall built in public. You could enter. You have coin. You're not legally barred today, at least not by a notice nailed to the beam. But the room would bend around you. Men would shift. Conversation would thin. Someone might mutter. Someone else might decide to prove bravery by provoking the man no one wants to touch. I'll would taste of effort. So you keep walking. This exclusion is not always written in the same ink. In some towns, dishonoured workers could be formally restricted from guild membership. Honourable civic offices, shared meals, or certain ritual roles. In others, custom did more work than law. No one needed to announce a ban if every bench was suddenly full when you approached. Medieval communities were skilled at making rejection look like coincidence. A seat could be empty until you needed it, then become mysteriously occupied by a cloak, a basket, or one very important elbow. At the guild hall, men gather beneath a carved sign. The shoemakers are meeting today, or perhaps the fullers, or the smiths. You know because their apprentices have been running errands since morning, carrying wax, bread, accounts, and that particular air of young men allowed near adult importance. Guild meetings mix business with ritual. They settle disputes, arrange training, support widows, pay for candles, honour patron saints, set standards, and remind members that belonging can be organised into rules and fees. Your trade has rules too. They're simply not the kind that earn you a banner. You pause by a wall where winter sunlight touches the stone. The apprentice is with you, sent to carry a repaired strap to a court servant later. He watches the guild men enter one by one. Their clothes are better than yours, not noble but confident. Some wear small signs of office. One man laughs and claps another on the shoulder. Touch comes easily among them. Hands on backs, sleeves brushed, cups shared, bread broken together. The apprentice notices this. Of course he does. Young people can detect belonging the way dogs detect meat. He asks, "Could I join one?" A small question or a heavy one. You look toward the guild door. A reliable pattern from many medieval towns is that guilds protected not only economic interests but social honour. Entry required reputation, training, fees, sponsorship, legitimate birth in some cases, and acceptance by the group. A boy from an executioner's household might face suspicion even if he had skill. Not always everywhere, not with identical harshness, but enough that the question cannot be answered kindly without risking dishonesty. Perhaps somewhere else. You say, "This is not a lie." It is not exactly hope either. It is a little bridge made of mist. But sometimes children need even that to cross an afternoon. Church offers no simple shelter. You enter near the side door. where cold stone holds the smell of wax, old incense, damp wool, and dust. Light falls through narrow windows in pale strips. The church receives all souls in theory, which is excellent news for souls and less reliable for bodies. You may stand at Mass, you may kneel, you may confess, you may hear the same gospel as the baker, the cooper, the sergeant, and the woman who dropped payment at your gate after dark, but shared salvation does not always become shared seating. Some eyes follow you, not the priest's. At first, he's busy near the altar, arranging objects with the serious care of a man who knows cloth can be holy if folded correctly. A widow near the front sees you and tightens her mouth. Two boys whisper until an older woman pinches one sharply. The apprentice lowers his head. You stand near the rear, where people like you often learn to stand, not outside the sacred space, not comfortably within it either. A curious custom from certain places placed executioners, gravediggers, or other dishonoured figures in particular spots during worship. Sometimes near doors or apart from others. Evidence varies, and one must be careful not to turn every local habit into a universal medieval rule. Still, seating and placement mattered. Where you stood in church could say almost as much as what you believed. Human beings have always found ways to rank humility. The priest begins the service. His voice settles the room. Latin rises and falls like a slow tide. Candles tremble. Somewhere a baby makes a soft questioning sound and is rocked back into patience. You kneel when others kneel. You stand when others stand. Your apprentice copies you. For a while, the shared motions almost erase difference. Almost, then comes the exchange of peace, or another moment when bodies acknowledge one another. Depending on local custom, and the old distance returns, hands do not quite reach yours. Eyes slide away. The body remembers what doctrine tries to soften. Afterward, people gather outside in little clusters. Plans are made, news exchanged, a wedding is mentioned, a baptism, a feast day procession. Someone laughs about a goose stolen by a dog, which sounds like the dog made the better legal argument. You and your apprentice stand near the churchyard wall. No one asks whether you will attend the wedding meal. No one invites your wife to help decorate the bridal house. No one imagines your children scattering flowers. The town's joy has doors too. Questions remain among modern researchers about how permeable these barriers could be in daily practice. Did money help? Did long service earn grudging familiarity? Could an executioner's family join parish festivals in some communities while being excluded in others? Local evidence suggests variation, and the line between official dishonour and practical neighbourliness was not always clean. A man might refuse you a cup in public, then ask you privately to mend his cow's leg. Social rejection was real, but human need kept poking holes through it. At the well, your wife stands alone. You see her before she sees you. She has a bucket at her feet and both hands on the rope. Two other women speak nearby, but not with her. Their conversation makes a little circle that closes without seeming to close. Your wife draws water steadily, shoulders straight. She does not look wounded. That is part of her armour. The bucket rises, dripping, and she lifts it with practiced strength. One of the women glances at her, not cruelly, perhaps curiously, uneasily, as if wondering whether loneliness leaves a visible mark. Your wife turns, sees you, and gives a nod so small only you would know it as greeting. She does not need rescuing. Rescue would make it worse. So you wait by the lane until she's finished and lifted the bucket. The apprentice steps forward to carry it. She lets him, because water is heavy and pride should not be stupid. The three of you walk home together. Behind you, the well resumes its murmur. Church doors close. The tavern grows louder. Guildmen return to business. Somewhere, preparations for a wedding continue without your household. The town gathers itself into tables, benches, pews, processions, and circles of talk. You're not starving, you're not banished, you're not invisible. That is the ache of it. You're seen clearly enough to be avoided, useful enough to be summoned, Christian enough to be prayed beside, skilled enough to be needed, but not clean enough, not safe enough, not ordinary enough to be offered a seat. At home, your own table waits. Rough wood, 3 bowls, a repaired bench, smoke above the hearth, a dog hopeful beneath it. No guild banner, no tavern song, no wedding cup passed hand to hand. Just your family, the water bucket, the bread, and the quiet dignity of sitting where no one can ask you to move. The court pays slowly, because money has a way of becoming shy when it owes itself to people like you. You learn this after breakfast, when your wife places the little household ledger on the table and turns it toward you without speaking. The gesture is calm, far too calm, a dangerous calm. On the page are marks for bread, oil, cord, lamp fat, a repair to the shed hinge, and the small debt still owed to the man who sold you winter firewood, while looking as if each log had been personally insulted. The eggs from the boy's family helped. The coin helped. Help is not the same as enough. So you go to the court clerk. The town hall sits near the square, where yesterday's crowd has already turned back into ordinary traffic. A woman sells onions where someone stood praying. A man argues about cloth where the sergeant held back spectators. A cart has splashed mud across the lower step of the hall, and no one has cleaned it yet, which tells you everything about civic pride before noon. Inside, the air smells of parchment, wax, damp wool, and the sour patience of people waiting to be told no. The clerk sits behind a table with documents arranged like a small fortress. He knows why you're there. His face says he knows. His hands, however, pretend to be surprised by papers. He lifts one, frowns at another, adjusts a knife used for trimming quills, and asks whether the service was completed according to order. You look at him for a moment, because both of you are there, and there are only so many stupid questions a room can hold before the walls begin to lean. Yes, you say. He dips the quill. Payment for executioners could be complicated. Some received fixed wages from a town, lord, or court. Others were paid by the task, with different fees for different punishments: transport, torture, burial work, animal disposal, or maintenance of equipment. Accounts from late medieval and early modern cities often list money for rope, wood, ladders, carts, assistants, and the executioner's own fee. Justice was moral theatre, certainly, but it also had expenses. Even righteousness needs a receipt. Apparently, the clerk asks whether rope was provided by you or by the town. You answer. He asks whether the ladder required repair. You answer. He asks whether the condemned man's clothing was retained, returned, or claimed. You answer more carefully. There are old understandings around such things, some written, some not. In certain places, executioners could claim the clothing of the condemned, or portions of goods, or small customary payments that made sense to officials until they angered everyone else. Such perquisites were not always granted, and not always gladly. A hood, belt, shoes, or cloak might be worth something, especially in a world where cloth is labour and labour is money. But every scrap taken from a dead man carries a story, and stories can bite. Today the clothing went to the family. The clerk's eyebrow moves slightly. Perhaps he thinks you too soft. Perhaps he thinks you foolish. Perhaps he is calculating whether this alters the fee. Clerks do not merely record reality, they negotiate with it in ink. You keep your face still. A servant enters with a tray of cups and does not offer you one. The clerk notices, then pretends not to notice. You notice him pretending not to notice, which is one of the quieter dances of public life. The servant leaves. Steam curls from the clerk's cup. It smells of watered wine warmed with spice. Your mouth fills with the idea of warmth, which is rude of it. You wait. The clerk counts coins slowly. 1, 2, a pause to check the record. 3, a longer pause, during which entire kingdoms may have risen and fallen. 4, he places them on the table. Not into your hand, naturally. You take them without comment. The coins are dull, cold, and slightly sticky from other fingers. They feel heavier than their value. Money paid for dishonoured work always does. You put them in your pouch and ask about the remaining amount owed for the rope and platform preparation. The clerk blinks. Ah, the remaining amount. The shy money. There it is, hiding in the paperwork like a mouse in straw. He says it will be settled after review by the town council. This may mean tomorrow, it may mean next week. It may mean when Saint Whoever descends from heaven with a purse and better administrative standards. You do not laugh. Laughing in front of clerks wastes energy that could be used to survive them. Odd little privileges sometimes attach themselves to your office in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. In some towns, the executioner had the right to take a measure from market goods, claim dead animals, charge for cleaning streets of carcasses, or receive fees from brothels, gambling houses, or other dishonoured spaces. Whether these customs belong to 1400 in every region is doubtful, because local practice varied wildly and later sources can exaggerate. Still, the pattern makes sense. A marginal man was often paid through marginal income. Society put its dirty coin where it placed its dirty work. You leave the hall with partial payment. Outside, the square is bright and cold. Your apprentice waits near the wall. Pretending not to be bored, he straightens when he sees you. His eyes go to your pouch. You give a small shake of your head, meaning not enough. He understands. Children of working households learn arithmetic from faces long before they learn it from slates. You cross to the cord seller, because yesterday's purchase has already been used and tomorrow is never polite enough to arrive unprepared. The seller sees you and begins measuring before you speak. That is useful and slightly depressing. He knows your needs too well. Hemp slides through his fingers in pale brown loops. He gives you a fair length, perhaps even a generous one. His cousin's horse died last winter, and you removed it when no one else would come near the frozen body. He never thanked you directly, but since then his measures have improved. Gratitude, in this town, sometimes arrives disguised as better rope. You pay, he takes the coin with less hesitation than the baker. Progress. Maybe. Or business. One should not become sentimental about commerce. On the way home, you stop near a stall selling old clothing, a patch sleeve, a cap. Child's shoes with one strap repaired. A woman sorting through the pile glances at you and shifts aside. Your apprentice needs a warmer outer garment before deeper winter. You examine a rough wool tunic. Too large. But that can be fixed. Your wife can make cloth obey better than most officials make men obey. The price is high. You haggle. The seller haggles back with the mournful dignity of someone being robbed by reality. You buy it. There goes one coin. The apprentice touches the cloth as if trying not to show pleasure. You pretend not to see. Kindness is sometimes easier when smuggled. How well executioners lived remains difficult to pin down. Some became surprisingly prosperous, especially in larger cities where their duties multiplied and side income flowed through legal and semi-legal channels. Others lived precariously, dependent on irregular fees, disliked payments, and unpleasant extra work. Wealth could not fully wash away dishonour, but poverty certainly did not improve it. The old records give amounts, but amounts do not always tell us whether a household slept warm, ate well, or feared the next unpaid bill. At home, your wife counts the coins. She does not curse the clerk, because children are nearby and because she prefers precise contempt over wasted noise. She sets aside one coin for grain, one for oil, and half a plan for the debt on firewood. The new tunic earns a glance. The apprentice looks at the floor. Your wife turns it inside out, studies the seams, and says it can be made useful. That is high praise. You sit near the hearth and loosen your pouch. Inside are the remaining coins, a scrap of cord, a dull token from an old fee, and a folded note from a court servant who promised payment last spring and has since treated memory as optional. You spread the items on the table. Each one is a little history of labour the town would rather not name. Outside, someone passes without pausing. Inside, the fire snaps. The child asks whether coins from the court are different from other coins. Your wife says all coins spend the same if someone accepts them. You add, quietly, that some are harder earned. No one argues. Evening gathers around the house. The day's payment is counted, divided, worried over, and made smaller by need. That is the truth of your grim little economy. Death may bring a fee, but life takes it away in bread, cloth, oil, rent, rope, and firewood. And tomorrow, if the court calls again, everyone will expect you ready. Night gives superstition a better voice. In daylight, people speak of law, wages, market prices, sermons, and what the council ought to do about the broken stones near the well. Sensible things, public things, things that can stand upright in a square without blushing, but after dark, when smoke lowers under rafters and wind rubs at shutters, other ideas creep from under the bed. Charms, omens, lucky scraps, curses, healing fat, ropes that remember death, touches that draw out sickness. The world becomes wider and stranger when candles burn low. You know this because they come to you then. Not every night, not even most nights, but often enough that the path near your gate has learned the soft steps of embarrassed people. A man whose cow will not rise, a woman whose child has fever, a soldier with a swelling under his jaw, a maidservant sent by a mistress who would rather be boiled in vinegar than knock herself. They come wrapped in cloaks, speaking quickly, asking for remedies they would deny believing in by breakfast. Tonight the knock is almost polite. Your wife hears it before you do. She pauses with the mending in her lap. The dog lifts one ear, decides this is not a heroic matter, and goes back to sleep. Your apprentice looks toward the door with the weary curiosity of a boy discovering that adulthood is mostly interruptions. You open the door. A young man stands outside, cap pulled low, breath white in the cold. You know him, a journeyman from the cooper's yard, broad shoulders, nervous mouth, hands that smell faintly of oaken ale. He looks past you rather than at you, which is difficult when you're standing directly in the doorway. But he makes a brave attempt. My sister, he says, she has fits. That word carries many fears. Fits might mean falling sickness, fever, possession, grief, injury, fright, or any number of conditions medieval people tried to name with the tools they had. He wants a scrap of cord. He says finally, "Not much, something touched by your work." Someone told his mother it might help if tied beneath the bed. Your wife's needle stops moving. The apprentice looks down. There it is again. The town recoils from your tools in the square, then asks for a piece of them in the dark. Very tidy thinking, very normal. Humanity loves a contradiction if it comes wrapped in desperation. You tell the young man you will not give cord from a killing. His face falls, but you do give him a clean strip of linen, one you've used for bindings when setting bones. And you tell him to keep his sister from the fire during an episode, to cushion her head, to send for the priest if they wish, and to fetch the barber surgeon if she's injured. He listens, disappointed and grateful at the same time. People often prefer magic to instructions because magic does not ask them to stay awake all night. Medieval healing was not divided into neat modern categories. Learned medicine drew on ancient authorities, humours, astrology, diet, bleeding, and regimen, monasteries, households, barber surgeons, midwives, folk practitioners, saints' shrines, charms, prayers, relics, and practical experience all overlapped. A person might confess at church, drink an herbal infusion, wear an amulet, avoid certain foods, and ask the executioner for a forbidden scrap before dawn. It was not always ignorance. Sometimes it was a crowded toolbox. The young man leaves with the linen hidden under his cloak. You close the door and return to the hearth. Your apprentice asks, "Would rope have helped?" Your wife snorts before you answer. Not cruelly, more like someone hearing a chicken argue theology. "Rope helps hold things," she says, "mostly fools." You almost smile. Still, the boy deserves a fuller answer. You tell him that belief itself can steady people. A charm may do nothing to a fever, but a mother with something to tie beneath the bed may feel less helpless. And less helpless people sometimes care better for the sick. But you also tell him that some objects carry trouble. A scrap from the scaffold can become rumour, and rumour can walk farther than truth. By morning, half the town may say you sold death to a sick girl, the other half may ask the price. He thinks about that. The fire pops. A strand of sparks lifts and dies in the chimney. Strange stories cling to executioners because they stand at a border. Life and death, law and violence, pollution and usefulness, sacred fear and civic paperwork. People often imagine power where boundaries are crossed. The hand that ends a life might also, in folk imagination, shock sickness away. The rope that took breath might bind luck. The fat of an executed criminal, later sought in some places for ointments, might be thought to ease pain. It sounds grotesque. Yes, but to a person with aching joints, a burned hand, or a child wasting with illness, disgust may lose an argument to hope. Not all such beliefs can be placed neatly in the year 1400. Some are better documented in later centuries, when executioners in parts of Europe were known to sell remedies, body substances, or charms. Yet the medieval soil was already rich with the ideas that made those practices plausible relic power. Contact magic, saintly intercession, blessed objects, cursed objects, and the belief that extraordinary bodies carried extraordinary force. The exact timeline is muddy, and historians keep sorting through local records, medical texts, trial accounts, and folklore to separate practice from legend. The mud, naturally, refuses to behave. Later that same night, a second visitor comes. This one does not knock at first. He scratches at the gate like a dog too proud to bark. Your wife gives you the look that means if this is another fool, charge extra. You step out with a lamp. An older woman waits in the yard, her face deeply lined, her cloak patched but clean. She carries a small pouch and smells of rosemary, smoke and sheep's wool. You know her too. She sells herbs near the north gate and has never once pretended to be afraid of you, which either makes her unusually sensible or unusually dangerous. Sometimes the line is thin. She wants ash from the scaffold place. You tell her the scaffold has been taken down. Not from the scaffold, she says. From where the brazier stood. That is different. Apparently. She says it can be mixed with grease and laid near a doorway to keep envy out. Envy, one assumes, being unable to cross ash without slipping on its pride. You ask whether ordinary hearth ash would do. She gives you a pitying look. You've seen judges with less authority. You give her a pinch from yesterday's cold brazier ash, taken from a bucket near the shed. In return, she hands you dried yarrow and a little comfrey root wrapped in cloth. Useful things, not miracles, useful, you trust useful. The exchange is almost pleasant. Before leaving, she peers into your face and says, "You should sleep more." This from a woman collecting anti-envy ash at night. You thank her anyway. Inside, your wife unwraps the herbs and approves. The apprentice asks whether envy truly fears ash. Your wife says envy fears full bellies, clean shirts, and neighbours doing better than expected. Ash may help if the envy is stupid. The child, half asleep by the hearth. asks whether stupid envy looks different from clever envy. No one has an answer ready. Some questions should be allowed to wander off unanswered, especially after midnight. You sit by the fire as the house settles again. Superstition, you think, is not simply foolishness drifting through dark minds. It is fear trying to organize itself. It is pain looking for handles. It is religion, memory, rumor, medicine, and need mixed together in a pot no one labels accurately. The town fears you because you touch death. The town seeks you because you touch death. The same fact feeds both reactions. Outside, wind moves along the fence. Somewhere, the cooper's sister lies in her bed with clean linen tied beneath it instead of scaffold rope. Somewhere, an old herbal woman places ash near a doorway and mutters words older than the council's latest rule. Somewhere, a neighbour tells another neighbour that your house is cursed, while secretly hoping you're home if the cow falls sick. You bank the fire, the last red coals glow like watchful eyes, then soften under ash. In this life, superstition clings to you like smoke. It gets into your clothes, your tools, your name, your doorway. No amount of washing fully removes it, but smoke, for all its sting, also proves there is a fire somewhere, and fire, at least, can keep a house warm through the long medieval dark. Morning begins with a mistake in the weather. Rain comes down before sunrise, thin and cold, tapping on the roof, darkening the yard, turning the lane into a miserable ribbon of mud. It is the sort of rain that seems too weak to matter until it has soaked every sleeve, softened every knot, made every ladder slick, and persuaded every person in town that someone else is responsible for their discomfort. Bad weather does not create anger by itself. It only gives anger wet boots. By the time you reach the square, the crowd is already restless. Not large, not festive, not solemn in any noble sense. Restless. People huddle beneath cloaks and patched hoods. Rain beads on wool, drips from noses, runs down the sides of barrels, and gathers beneath the scaffold in dark puddles. The market sellers have pulled back their goods, annoyed that justice has occupied the better space again. A man with a basket of onions mutters that the day is cursed. A woman tells him to hush. He does not hush, because being told to hush is rarely effective medicine for a man who wanted to sell onions and instead receive public execution weather. You feel it at once. The crowd has a mood. Crowds always do, though no single person admits to owning it. A crowd can be frightened, bored, hungry, pious, impatient, drunk, grieving, curious, or all of these at once, which is basically a recipe for poor decision-making with witnesses. Today, the mood is damp and sharp. It clings to the scaffold before the condemned even arrives. Your apprentice stands close to the tool chest. He has learned enough now to sense trouble in the air. Not magic. Observation. The way guards grip their spears. The way the sergeant keeps looking toward the lane. The way the judge speaks too curtly to the clerk. The way spectators stand not in a wide ring but in tight clumps, each one murmuring its own version of what ought to happen. Rumour has arrived before the prisoner. The condemned man today is not beloved, but he is known. That makes everything harder. A stranger can be turned into an example with less resistance. A neighbour comes with attachments. Someone remembers borrowing his cart. Someone else remembers a quarrel at harvest. A cousin stands near the back, red-eyed and furious. Two men from his village mutter that the court rushed the matter. A merchant whispers that the sentence is too light. A priest watches the crowd more than the prisoner's path. Good. At least someone beside you has noticed the tinder. Public executions were meant to display order, but they could also expose disorder. Authorities depended on the crowd to witness punishment. Yet a gathered crowd was never fully obedient. It might cheer, pray, jeer, riot, rescue a condemned person, attack officials, or punish the executioner for perceived cruelty or incompetence. The ritual worked only when everyone accepted the script. And crowds. Being crowds has occasionally decided to revise the script with stones. The prisoner arrives late. Only a little late, but enough. The rain has soaked his hair flat to his head. His cloak hangs heavily from his shoulders. He's pale, stiff, and walking badly. Perhaps from fear. Perhaps from a night in chains. Perhaps from the mud. The delay has given the crowd time to season itself. That is never helpful. People who wait too long for violence often begin to feel they are owed something in return for standing there. The crier speaks, but the rain eats the edges of his words. A murmur rises. Someone calls out that the man was not properly heard. Someone else shouts back that thieves always find excuses. The sergeant barks for quiet. The crowd quiets, but not completely. It becomes the kind of quiet that listens with its teeth. You climb the scaffold. The boards are slick. You test your footing. A peg near the platform edge has swollen with wet and will not sit flush. You curse it inwardly with impressive restraint. The apprentice brings a wedge. You tap it into place. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound seems too small for the size of the watching square. The condemned man is led up. He slips on the ladder. The crowd reacts before he falls. Gasps, shouts, a laugh from somewhere. Quickly smothered. One guard grabs his arm roughly, too roughly. The prisoner cries out, and the cousin near the back surges forward. Not far, but enough that two others catch him. Mud splashes, the sergeant yells. The priest lifts his hand and begins speaking loudly, trying to lay a cloth of prayer over the noise. You step between the guard and the condemned. Not dramatically, just enough. Slowly, you say, to the guard, not the prisoner. The guard glares. You ignore him. The condemned must reach the top standing, not dragged like a sack. A rough guard makes your task worse. A wounded prisoner makes the crowd angrier. If the law wants a warning, it should avoid looking like a brawl in a puddle. A strange belief in some places held that the executioner's failure could be read almost as an omen. A bungled punishment might suggest divine displeasure, innocence, bad luck, or the incompetence of officials in later folklore. Ropes breaking or blades missing could become signs that heaven had objected. Real courts were not usually so romantic, unfortunately for anyone hoping for celestial paperwork. But the crowd loved meanings, and a mishap could turn technical trouble into moral accusation very quickly. You feel the rope in your hand, wet. Not dangerously wet, but changed by rain. You checked it before leaving. You check it again now, fingers moving over the fibres. The apprentice watches, ready with spare cord if needed. The judge frowns at the delay. Let him frown. Judges rarely fall through the practical consequences of their own impatience. The condemned man begins to speak. Not the prepared words from the priest, his own. He says the court has wronged him. His voice cracks, but rain and fear carry it strangely. The cousin shouts agreement. Someone else shouts that he should confess. A woman near the well begins to weep. The priest leans close, urging prayer. The sergeant looks at the judge. The judge's face has hardened into official stone. There will be no postponement. You wait for the signal. Waiting may be the bravest thing you do that morning. Not because waiting is grand, because everything in the square pushes against it. The judge wants completion. The guard wants control. The crowd wants certainty, anger, mercy, spectacle, contradiction, and something to talk about for the rest of winter. The condemned wants time. The priest wants a soul turned toward God. Your apprentice wants the boards to stop feeling like a ship in bad water. You want the act done properly, or not at all. The signal comes. You act with the careful speed of long practice. For one suspended moment, it seems the square accepts what has happened. Then the rope jerks awkwardly against the rain-slick beam. Not a failure, Not truly, but not clean enough for a crowd already hungry for trouble. A sound rises. The cousin shouts something raw. A clod of mud flies from the edge of the square and strikes the scaffold post. Then another. A stone follows, not large, but hard enough to crack against the boards near your boot. The guards move. The sergeant bellows. The crowd ripples backward and forward. No longer a circle, but a creature deciding whether it has claws. Your apprentice freezes. You seize his sleeve and pull him behind the chest. Down, you say. Another stone hits the platform. The priest is shouting now. Not prayer, but command. The judge has retreated behind 2 guards, which is a very traditional position for people who make dangerous decisions from safer distances. The sergeant's men push into the front line. Striking with spear shafts, not blades, no one wants blood in the crowd. More blood rarely improves a legal ceremony. Bold observation, but worth keeping. You crouch, one hand on the chest, one on the apprentice's shoulder. The rain keeps falling as if none of this is its fault. Arguments persist among historians about how frequent crowd violence at executions really was. Dramatic incidents are easier to record than ordinary days, which can make disorder appear more common than it was. Yet records from different regions do show anxieties about rescue, riot, insult, and the crowd's judgment of the executioner. The scaffold was a stage, but it stood in a living town, not inside a sealed courtroom. Once people gathered, authority had to perform not only punishment, but control. Slowly the sergeant restores the line. Not gently. Mud streaks cloaks. A man is shoved to his knees. The cousin is dragged away shouting until his voice breaks. The rest of the crowd remembers itself in pieces. People step back, faces close. Those who threw nothing look offended on behalf of public order. Those who threw something suddenly become students of the ground. You rise. Your apprentice rises after you, pale and breathing hard. The judge signals that the duty is complete. Of course he does. From the record's point of view, completion is the most convenient truth. The clerk will write something tidy. No parchment will smell of rain, fear, wet rope and mud thrown by a cousin who believed the court had lied. You pack the tools with hands that do not shake. That is also part of survival. The crowd disperses badly. No soft murmur this time and no clean return to market noise. People leave in clumps, carrying anger like coals hidden under cloaks. By nightfall, some will blame the judge, some the condemned, some the cousin, some the weather. Many, inevitably, will blame you. The hand is easier to hate than the sentence. The hand has a door, a face, a child, a wife at the well. As you lift the chest, the apprentice whispers, "Did we fail?" You look at the wet boards, the guards, the priest wiping rain from his face, the judge already turning away, and the square beginning its long effort to pretend it is only a square again. No, you say, but they needed someone to throw it. You carry the tools home through rain that has washed nothing clean. The summons comes from beyond your own walls. Not the town walls, though you pass those too, but the invisible walls that usually hold your life in one place. A rider arrives in the morning with a sealed instruction from a nearby lord's officer. The wax is cracked at one edge. The horse is lathered, annoyed, and clearly convinced that humans invent urgent business mainly to inconvenience animals. The message is short. You're required at a village 2 leagues away, where the local court has no executioner of its own and has decided, with all the warmth of official necessity, to borrow you. Borrow is a charming word. It makes you sound like a ladder. Your wife reads the officer's mark, then looks at the sky. Low clouds, cold wind, roads soft from recent rain. She says nothing for a moment, which means she's counting risks faster than the clerk could count coins. Travel means time away, uncertain payment, bad roads, hostile villages, and the small danger of being recognised everywhere and welcome nowhere. Still, the order is real. The fee may be useful. The work cannot be refused without consequence. So you pack, not much. A cloak, bread wrapped in cloth, a small cheese hardened at the edges, cord, tools, oil, a whetstone, a strip of linen, a cup. Your apprentice comes with you, because this is part of his schooling too. A trade inherited indoors must also be learned on the road. He looks half eager and half worried, which is a reasonable expression for anyone leaving home before breakfast with a chest of grim equipment. The dog tries to follow. Your wife sends it back with one word. The dog obeys, offended but alive. A good outcome. You leave through the gate as the town is waking. The guard nods, and this time his nod contains something almost like relief. Your departure makes you less his problem for the day. Outside the wall, the road bends between fields damp with mist. Hedgerows bead with water. Bare branches scratch the pale sky. The ground sucks softly at your boots, each step making that wet little sound mud uses to remind travellers who is in charge. The apprentice shifts the pack on his shoulder. "Do they know us there?" he asks. "Enough," you say. He understands. News travels by carts, priests, peddlers, kinship, fairs, lawsuits, marriages, servants, and men who claim they dislike gossip while carrying it like a holy relic. A village 2 leagues away may know your name before it knows your face. That can be worse. Faces at least complicate hatred. Names allow imagination to work freely. Executioners did not always serve only one fixed town. In many regions, smaller communities relied on executioners from larger towns or from nearby jurisdictions. A skilled hangman, headsman, torturer or punisher might travel when courts required his services. Lords, bishops, city councils, and regional officers could summon such men, pay travel expenses, provide assistance, or argue afterward about who owed what. Justice, like roofing and cart repair, sometimes required bringing in a specialist. The road narrows near a patch of woodland. Here the air changes. It smells of wet leaves, cold bark, and the dark green breath of moss. Water drips steadily from branches. Though the rain has stopped, somewhere a crow calls. Then another answers. Your apprentice steps around a puddle and nearly loses his balance. You catch the strap of his pack before he falls. He mutters thanks in the embarrassed tone of someone who would prefer gravity to be more discreet. You pass a shrine at a crossroads. A weather-worn figure of the Virgin stands beneath a little wooden roof. Flowers long dead at her feet. Candle wax hardened in pale lumps near the base. Travellers have left pins, bits of thread, a broken comb, a small coin too poor to tempt thieves, and a strip of cloth tied to a branch. You stop long enough to bow your head, not dramatically. The road is no place to annoy heaven, even if heaven has been keeping complicated company lately. Your apprentice copies you. Then he notices something tied behind the shrine, half hidden where the roof beam meets the post. A short loop of cord, weathered and grey. Perhaps ordinary. Perhaps not. People leave strange offerings where roads meet. A charm against thieves. A prayer for safe passage. A token from someone who wanted misfortune to turn aside and choose another traveller, which is understandable if not exactly generous. He asks what it is. Someone's fear. You say, that seems sufficient. By noon, you reach an inn that looks tired before anyone enters it. Smoke leaks from the roof. A pig sleeps beside the door with the confidence of a creature that knows it is locally respected. Inside. The common room is low, dim, and warm enough to make your wet cloak steam. The smell of ale, onions, smoky and damp strangers wraps around you. A few travellers sit at a table. A peddler with a pack of needles and ribbons. 2 carters. A man in a pilgrim badge who may be holy. Lost, or very committed to accessories. The innkeeper recognises the officer's seal when you show it. His face changes. Not refusal. Refusal would be troublesome if an official later asked why the summoned man arrived hungry. But the room notices. The peddler looks at your hands. One carter suddenly finds his cup fascinating. The pilgrim murmurs something that might be prayer or indigestion. The innkeeper gives you bread, ale, and a place near the door. Near the door is very popular seating for people whom nobody wants trapped deep inside a room. A few unusual accounts from later centuries describe executioners travelling with written passes or official protections, because their movements could stir fear, insult, or danger. Whether your exact year and region required such a document is uncertain, but the idea fits the practical world you inhabit. A lord may despise your office socially and still want proof that no toll-keeper, guard, or village bully delays the man summoned to perform lawful violence. Authority enjoys its own convenience. You eat without speaking much. The bread is coarse, the ale sour, the cheese better than expected. The apprentice watches the other travellers watch him. He's beginning to learn a special road skill, how to sit in a room as if the room's discomfort belongs to someone else. This takes practice. Most people spend years trying to be liked. You're teaching him to survive being useful instead. After the inn, the road climbs. The fields open into low hills where sheep graze under the care of a boy wrapped in a cloak too large for him. He sees your pack and stares. A woman cutting brush pauses and crosses herself. Perhaps she knows. Perhaps she only guesses. The office clings to you, even without a scaffold nearby. You carry a kind of weather around your name. The village appears in late afternoon. First a church tower, squat and grey, then roofs clustered around a muddy green, then smoke, geese, a mill stream, a cart tilted near a wall, children who stop playing as soon as the sergeant from the manor points you out. The local people have been waiting. You feel their attention gather before you enter the street. This is not your town's familiar dislike. This is fresher, sharper, more curious. They have not learned your exact shape yet. They are still deciding which stories fit. A manor officer meets you near the churchyard. He is polite because he needs you. His politeness has the texture of cold porridge, but one must appreciate effort where one finds it. He explains the sentence. The court has sat. The prisoner is held in a barn because the village has no proper jail. The scaffold will be a beam near the old elm. Payment will be made partly in coin and partly in kind. You ask what kind? He says oats, of course. Nothing says civic justice like carrying oats home after a hanging. Specialists still argue over how far an executioner's social stigma travelled with him. In his hometown, everyone knew his family, door, habits, and debts. On the road, he might become more anonymous, or more frightening because rumour had done the introducing. Some documents show official reliance on such men across districts. They do not always reveal whether villagers saw a travelling executioner as a servant of law, a cursed outsider, a necessary craftsman, or an ill omen with boots. Probably all four, depending on who was asked and how close supper was. You're shown the place. The old elm stands near the green, branches bare against the dim sky. The beam chosen for the work has been fixed between two supports, not elegant but solid enough if properly checked. You test it. You test it again. The officer watches, impatient. You ignore him. A poor village scaffold can fail as quickly as a poor town scaffold, and a failed punishment in a place where everyone is related to everyone else is a very special form of nightmare. Your apprentice unpacks the cord. Around you, villagers pretend not to gather. A blacksmith stands with folded arms. Two women whisper beside a cart. Children are dragged indoors and immediately reappear at windows. The priest waits near the barn, pale, serious, and very young. The condemned is somewhere behind those doors, hearing voices. Perhaps hearing your arrival in the silence between them. You roll your shoulders under the cloak. The road has stiffened your back. Mud weighs your boots. Cold has settled into your fingers. You're tired before the work begins. But travel changes nothing essential. Whether in your own square or a village that pays in oats, the same demands meet you. Be steady, be quick, be useful, be hated at a manageable distance. The officer asks if everything is ready. You look at the beam, the rope, the fading light, the watching village, the young priest, the apprentice trying not to shiver, and the long road that will have to be walked again when the duty's done. Ready enough, you say, and in medieval life, ready enough is often the closest anyone gets. The young priest's hands shake only when he thinks no one is watching. You notice while the manor officer speaks with the village reeve near the old elm. The priest stands beside the barn door, fingers folded around a small wooden cross, his lips moving silently through words he's probably known since childhood. Prayer, rehearsal, panic, perhaps all three. He is not much older than your apprentice, though his robe and tonsure try hard to make him look official. The effort is touching. Clothing does what it can, the body tells the rest. Inside the barn, the condemned man waits. You can hear him before you see him. Not words, exactly. Breath. A scrape of boot against straw, a chain dragged once and then held still. The barn smells of hay, old animals, damp wood, and fear trying unsuccessfully to hide under farm smells. A cow in the next stall chews with calm indifference. Animals have a remarkable gift for refusing human drama unless it affects their feed. The priest looks at you as you approach. He wants to ask something. He does not want to ask it in front of the officer. You wait. Waiting gives people room to become brave. Finally, he says, quietly. He asks whether God can forgive him. There are many answers you're not qualified to give. This is one of them. You look toward the barn. The manor officer is still arguing about the oats. The reeve is explaining, with great seriousness, that the village measure is fair. It may even be fair. It may also be the kind of fair invented by people who pay in oats. Your apprentice kneels by the tool bundle, checking cord by the dim light, carefully staying out of the priest's conversation. That is your work, you say. The priest swallows, and yours. You think of the square at home, the prison door, the boy's broken arm, the woman in the brown hood, the rope wet with rain, the child asking whether clean hands are still hated. Your work is everywhere and nowhere inside the question. Mine is to leave him less afraid if I can, you answer. The priest nods, though he looks as if the answer has not comforted him much. Fair enough. Comfort is not always available in full portions. He enters the barn first. You follow only after the officer gestures. The condemned man sits on an overturned trough with his wrists bound before him. He is older than you expected. Beard streaked grey, one eye swollen from a fight or arrest. His boots are caked with mud. Straw clings to his cloak. He looks up at the priest, then at you, and his expression tightens. Not rage, recognition. He knows what your presence means. Every condemned person knows, even those who deny the sentence, curse the court, insist on innocence, or cling to miracles still know when the final workers entered the room in Christian medieval Europe. Confession and repentance before death carried enormous weight. Clergy often urged the condemned to confess, forgive enemies, accept the sentence as part of divine order, and prepare the soul for judgment. The execution was not only a legal ending, it was meant, at least in theory, to become a spiritual threshold. Whether that ideal comforted the condemned or pressed another burden onto him depended very much on the person, the priest, and the hour. The priest kneels near the man. His voice is low. The condemned answers in fragments. You step back toward the wall, close enough if needed, far enough to grant what little privacy a barn full of law allows. The cow chews. Rainwater drips from the roof into a bucket with slow, hollow plinks. Outside, villagers murmur beyond the door. Inside, the priest speaks of mercy. The condemned man laughs once. Not happily, not mockingly either. A dry crack of sound. "Mercy," he says. "Now." The priest closes his eyes for half a breath. To his credit, he does not scold. He only says that mercy may come late and still be mercy. That is a heavy sentence for such a young mouth. You wonder who taught it to him. Another priest. Perhaps. A book. A dying woman. Fear. Fear is an excellent but unpleasant teacher. The man turns to you. "Do you confess?" The question surprises the officer, who frowns as if conversation has overstepped schedule. The priest goes still. Your apprentice looks up from the bundle. The cow continues chewing, the wisest creature present. You do not answer immediately. Do you confess to what? To doing the work the court commands, to taking coin for it, to sometimes feeling nothing in the moment because feeling would make your hand fail, to sometimes feeling too much afterward when the house is quiet, to teaching a boy the same trade because hunger and heredity leave narrow doors. The question lands in places the condemned man likely did not intend. I confess when I must. You say, he studies you. And are you forgiven? The priest inhales softly, as if the conversation has stepped onto thin ice. Outside, I. The officer calls for the reeve, then lowers his voice again. The village waits. The elm waits. The law waits. Everyone waits for an answer that cannot possibly be large enough. I hope so. You say, that is honest. It may be the most dangerous kind of answer. A curious thread in medieval and later thought treated the executioner as both legally necessary and spiritually troubling. Some moralist could argue he performed justice as an instrument of authority. Popular feeling might still treat him as polluted by contact with death. In certain places he could receive sacraments and stand within the church, yet remain socially avoided. The soul apparently might be eligible for grace while the body was unwelcome at supper. Theology and dinner invitations have never operated by exactly the same rules. The condemned man lowers his head. The priest resumes. He asks whether the man forgives those who accused him. The man says nothing. The priest asks whether he seeks forgiveness for his own sins. The man's mouth twists. Perhaps he is guilty. Perhaps partly guilty. Perhaps innocent of the charge and guilty of other things, like nearly everyone alive. The tidy moral shape desired by public punishment rarely fits a real person. People are not sermons. Very inconvenient, but true. After a long silence, the man says he forgives his wife. No one expected that. The priest blinks. Your wife. She told them where I hid. Outside, a goose shrieks, as if scandal has reached the poultry. The priest asks, carefully, whether he understands why she might have done so. The man says she feared him. This too sits heavily in the barn. The officer looks away. Your apprentice bends over the cord, though he has already checked it twice. The condemned man's face folds in on itself, not with public repentance, but with something more private and therefore harder to witness. I forgive her, he says again. The priest makes the sign of the cross. There is argument among scholars over how far official narratives of repentance reflected true inner experience. Many accounts of executions present orderly confessions and edifying final words, because that is what communities wanted to record. Disorder, doubt, resentment, and ambiguous guilt often survive only in fragments. The condemned may have performed repentance for the crowd, sought it sincerely, resisted it, or moved between all three in a single hour. Souls do not leave neat minutes in the court book. You step outside while the priest hears the rest. The air feels colder after the barn. The village green is filled. People cluster by cottages, by the churchyard wall near carts beneath the old elm. Their faces are watchful and damp with mist. Some know the condemned man, some fear him, some pity his wife. Some came because work paused and curiosity filled the space. A woman in a grey cloak stands near the back, her face hidden. You wonder if she's the wife. You do not look too long. Your apprentice comes out beside you. He whispers, "Does it matter? What? If he is forgiven?" You watch the priest's shadow move inside the barn. To him, yes. To us, you could say no, it would be simpler. But the boy is learning more than knots now, and simple lies become poor tools later. To us, if we remember he is a man. The apprentice says nothing. The manor officer finally finishes arguing about oats. He approaches with brisk authority, as if moral difficulty can be solved by posture. He asks whether all is ready. You say the priest is not finished. The officer frowns. You do not move. This is a small rebellion, but an important one. A man gets one final confession. A court can wait long enough for grace to find its shoes. At last, the priest emerges. His face is pale, but steadier. He nods once. The condemned man follows between guards. His steps are slow, but not wild. The crowd murmurs. The woman in the grey cloak lowers her head. The priest walks close, speaking softly. You take your place near the elm. For a moment, the whole village seems to breathe through the same narrow opening. You've stood here many times, though never exactly here. Every scaffold, every beam, every square, every barn, every prison door is different. Yet the question returns. Sin, law, fear, forgiveness, work. Your hands. The condemned man looks once toward the woman in grey. Then he looks at you. This time, there is no question about speed, no demand, no accusation, only a tired recognition that you are both standing where the world has placed you. You do your work, the priest prays, the village watches, and when it is finished, the young priest remains with his head bowed longer than anyone else, as if he's listening for something beneath the wind, something neither the court nor the crowd can record. The road home teaches by repetition. Mud, step, breath. Mud, step, breath. The village falls behind you, its church tower shrinking into mist, its old elm becoming only a dark fork against the pale afternoon. Your payment rides in 2 small sacks of oats tied badly to a borrowed pack frame, because apparently justice must now travel like breakfast for a horse. The apprentice keeps glancing at the sacks as they sway. Each time one slips, he corrects it with irritation far beyond its size. This is useful. Irritation is safer than thought. The young priest's face still follows both of you. So does the condemned man's question. Are you forgiven? The road has no answer. Roads rarely do. They only continue, which may be why people in the Middle Ages trusted pilgrimages, errands, military marches, and exile to change a person. Movement gives sorrow something to do with its feet. You let the apprentice walk in silence for the first mile. Then, where the road enters the trees and the wind lowers, you ask him to tie a practice knot around a branch. He looks at you as if you have asked him to recite law while carrying oats in a swamp. Here, here. He sets down the pack frame with theatrical suffering. The oats slump. One sack makes a soft, dusty sigh. He takes a length of cord from his pouch and chooses a low branch. His fingers are cold, and cold fingers tell the truth about training. In the house, beside the fire. He can tie well enough. On the road, tired, watched by you. With damp bark under the cord and the memory of the village still breathing behind him. He fumbles. You do not scold. Not yet. He loops, pulls, pauses, corrects and tightens. The knot holds, but sits badly. Too much twist. A hidden weakness where the cord crosses itself. Enough for a bundle, perhaps. Not enough for work that must not fail. You untie it and show him again. This is how the unwanted art travels from hand to hand. Not through grand speeches. Not through secret books bound in black leather. Though storytellers would adore that. It travels through correction, through the angle of a wrist, through the command to check again, through learning that a knot is never only a knot when the town is watching. In many medieval trades, apprenticeship was the normal road into skilled work. Boys and sometimes girls learned by living with or near a master, performing small tasks, observing, repeating, and slowly taking on greater responsibility. Executioners, when the office became hereditary or semi-hereditary, taught in a similar practical way, though outside the comfort of honourable guild structures, the lesson was still craft. The craft was simply one respectable society did not want to call craft. The apprentice tries again. Better. Not perfect. You make him do it a third time. Now his jaw tightens. Good. Anger can steady a hand if it does not climb into the eyes. He ties, pulls, sets, tests. The knot sits cleaner. You nod. He exhales as if he has survived trial by bishop. You walk on. The road opens into fields where winter has flattened the grass. Crows move across a furrowed patch, glossy and important, pausing to stab at invisible treasures. In the distance, a shepherd leans on his staff and watches you pass. Does he know who you are? Perhaps he only sees two travellers and a load of oats making poor progress. There is relief in being unidentified, even for a few minutes. Anonymity is a small holiday. The apprentice breaks the silence. Did your father make you practice on roads? Yes. Did you hate it? Yes. This comforts him more than any tender speech could have done. You stop near a ditch where water runs brown under thin ice. There. You make him check the cord for damp swelling. He must learn by touch. Dry hemp, wet hemp, old hemp, new hemp, rope stored badly, rope stored well. He must know the smell of rot before rot becomes visible. He must know that leather stiff in frost may crack when forced. He must know that a blade kept sharp for one task may still fail at another if the edge has rolled. He must know how to stand where a crowd can see confidence but not arrogance. Very easy, of course. Like balancing a cup of ale on a bishop's hat during a rainstorm. He listens, or appears to. Young apprentices often store instruction in mysterious ways. Some lessons vanish immediately, then return months later when the hand suddenly remembers what the ear ignored. You hand him the whetstone. Not to sharpen, not here, to hold. Feel the hollow, you say. He runs his thumb over the slight curve worn into the stone. Years of blades have shaped it. Your father's hand, yours. Now his. A family tree can be drawn in many ways. Some use names and marriages. Yours could be drawn in worn tools, repaired straps, and children learning to keep their faces still. There are odd stories in later tradition of executioners training on animals. Straw figures, carcasses, or condemned bodies in medical settings. Though the evidence is uneven and often coloured by fascination, what is more certain is simpler and less lurid. Anyone expected to perform public punishment needed repeated practical training. You learn weights by carrying, knots by tying, blades by sharpening, crowds by standing before them, fear by meeting it often enough that it becomes familiar, though never exactly friendly. The apprentice asks, "When did you first do it alone?" You keep walking a few steps before answering. "Older than you?" "How much older?" "Old enough to wish I were older still." That is also true. He considers this with the solemn disappointment of a young person denied a precise number. Numbers feel firm. Memory is not firm. Your first time alone is a blur of morning light, a guard with garlic breath, a priest who sang badly, a condemned man who had not stopped shaking, and your father standing below the platform with his arms folded. You remember looking for approval afterward and receiving only one sentence. You did not hurry. At the time, you hated him for saying so little. Years later, you understood it was praise. The road rises toward a ridge. From there, you can see your town in the distance. The wall like a dull belt around roofs and smoke. Home, a strange word for a place that fears you. Yet there it is, with your wife by the hearth, your child asking impossible questions, the dog guarding nothing with confidence, and the same clerk probably still hiding money behind paper. Not warm welcome, perhaps, but yours. Before descending, you stop again. The apprentice groans. You ignore this deeply moving musical performance and set the pack frame down. This time the lesson is posture. How to stand beside officials, where to place hands, how to keep the shoulders loose, how not to look at the crowd too often, how to listen for the signal, how to wait when an impatient judge wants speed before readiness, how to say no without using the word no, because no from a man like you can become insolence faster than rain becomes mud. He copies you. At first he looks stiff, almost comic, a scarecrow trying to impress a magistrate. You adjust his shoulders, lower the chin, hands still, feet placed for balance. Not drama. He tries again. Better. Still young, still thin, still carrying fear under the skin, but better. Whether executioners trained sons from childhood or only after adolescence seems to have depended on family, law, and local need. The surviving records often name men once they held office, not the years of practice before. That leaves room for argument among those who study the subject. Some households surely introduce children early to minor tasks: cleaning, carrying, animal work, ropes and tools. Others may have shielded them as long as possible. The archive rarely pauses to describe a boy on the muddy road learning where to put his feet, but here he stands, a boy between childhood and the profession that may take him. You look at him and feel the old double wound. Pride, because he learns. Sorrow, because he must. The town will one day see his coat before it sees his face. It will judge his hands before it knows whether they are gentle. It will need him, fear him, insult him, call him in the night, and perhaps pay him in oats. You pick up the pack frame and hand it to him. He takes it without complaint this time. Together, you descend toward the gate. The road grows firmer underfoot as carts have packed it down near town. Smoke thickens, dogs bark. A bell rings the late hour. Your apprentice walks beside you, not quite a child now, not yet the man the town may make of him. At the gate, the guard sees the oats and raises an eyebrow. Good fee, he asks. Depends how hungry the horse is. You say. The guard laughs before remembering who made the joke. Then he coughs, embarrassed, and waves you through. Your apprentice hears it. The small laugh, the quick retreat, the whole lesson in one breath. He looks at you. You look ahead. Some parts of the unwanted art cannot be tied, sharpened, oiled, or practiced on a branch. They must be lived, again and again, until the face learns stillness and the heart finds a place to keep what the hands have been taught. The town changes most clearly in its paperwork, not all at once. Nothing in this world changes all at once, except perhaps weather, mood, and the price of grain when everyone is already worried. But over the years, if you watch carefully, the court's language shifts. The clerk writes more. The council keeps fuller accounts. Officers ask for clearer warrants. Fees are disputed with better records and worse tempers. Sentences are copied, sealed, stored and referred to later by men who seem to believe parchment can make the world behave. You notice because paperwork decides when your door is knocked upon. A generation earlier, your father answered summonses that were often blunt, local, and carried by men who expected obedience because everyone knew who held power. Now, more often, the words arrive with seals, lists, witness names, and instructions. The law still smells of damp wool and old ink. It still ends, sometimes with a rope, a blade, a brand, or a public post. But before it reaches your hands, it passes through more writing. This does not make it gentle. It makes it organized. You sit one afternoon near the court table while two officials argue over whether the sentence from a neighbouring jurisdiction has been properly certified. The prisoner waits somewhere else. The priest has not yet been called. The sergeant stands by the door, bored enough to become dangerous to flies. The clerk reads aloud in a voice made for punishing listeners. He repeats names, dates, seals, and charges. Everyone nods with solemn attention, though you suspect half of them would rather be staring into a ditch. The apprentice, as is older now, stands behind you. He is no longer quite the narrow boy who watched you at the hearth. His shoulders have broadened. His hands know cord, leather, oil and restraint. He can tie the practice knots in the rain. He can clean a blade without turning it into theatre. He knows when to look at officials, when to watch the crowd, and when to keep his face as blank as a winter wall. The town still sees him as your son, or your apprentice, or the next one, which is a terrible way to become known before becoming yourself. Across late medieval Europe, legal systems were not frozen. Royal courts, urban councils, ecclesiastical authorities, manorial jurisdictions, and regional customs overlapped, competed, and slowly adjusted. Written records expanded in many places. Procedures could become more formal. Punishment remained public and often harsh, but the machinery around it grew more elaborate. A man like you stood at the end of that machinery. No matter how many seals were pressed into wax, the final act still needed hands. The officials finally decide the document is acceptable. The clerk looks pleased, as if he personally invented justice. You are given instructions, not immediately. First, the judge explains them to the sergeant, who explains them to the clerk, who writes them down, while you stand close enough to hear everything and far enough to be treated as furniture with a pulse. Then the clerk turns to you and repeats what everyone already knows. This is law's little lullaby. Say it, write it, repeat it, confirm it, and perhaps reality will stay in its chair. You nod. The apprentice nods a breath later, outside the court building. The square looks different from the town of your youth. A few houses have new fronts. The baker's son runs the stall now, fatter than his father and less subtle in his dislike. The old well rope has been replaced twice. A new devotional image hangs near the church porch. The tavern sign has been repainted, making the boar look less like a boar and more like a shocked bishop. Progress comes in strange forms, yet when you cross the square, people still shift aside. That part has not changed. The law may grow more written, the accounts neater, the officials more particular about warrants, but the space around your body remains almost exactly the same width. A woman gathers her child nearer. A man lowers his voice. A dog sniffs your boot and is called back sharply. Though the dog clearly had no moral objection, the apprentice notices. He always notices. He has grown up inside that ring of air. Once, a visiting scholar attached to a bishop's household came through town and asked to observe court procedure. He wore soft gloves, quoted Roman law, and seemed fascinated by everything in the way only a person passing through can afford to be. He asked the clerk about sentencing forms, the judge about jurisdiction, the priest about confession, and you about technique, not crudely, to his credit, but curiously, as if your work were part of a puzzle on a table. Later, the same scholar declined to share a cup with you at the tavern. Of course he did. Learning has boundaries too. In some regions, during the later Middle Ages and into the early modern period, the office of executioner became more professionalized and more closely tied to official legal structures. Families could hold posts for generations. Cities kept accounts of payments. Executioners might maintain equipment, travel between jurisdictions, and perform a range of penal and marginal tasks. At the same time, older patterns of dishonour persisted. Procedure could modernize without kindness improving at the same pace, which is perhaps one of history's less surprising tricks. The apprentice asks whether things will be different for his children. You're repairing a strap when he asks. Evening light lies across the table. The house smells of leather, smoke and boiled turnips. Your wife sits near the hearth, listening without appearing to listen. A highly developed household art. The child, not so small now, grinds herbs with a stone and pretends not to be interested. Different how you ask. Less like this. He does not need to explain. less stepping aside, less silence at the well, less payment delayed because the clerk can insult a man through arithmetic, less being prayed near but not eaten with, less being summoned at night by people who will deny it by day, less inheriting a coat that enters the room before you do. You pull the strap through your fingers. Maybe you say, "It is the kindest answer available that does not become a lie." Because change is real. You have seen it. More papers, more officers, more careful sentences, more talk of proper procedure and lawful authority. In some cities, men in your profession will one day become wealthy enough to own fine houses, employ assistants, keep records, and marry into other executioner families across regions like a dark mirror of guild respectability. In other places, they will remain poor, despised, half necessary and half cursed. Time does not move every road at the same speed. Old beliefs, meanwhile, are stubborn. Only last week, a woman came asking for a charm against fever. Yesterday, a boy dared another boy to touch your fence. This morning, the baker's son wiped your coin after taking it. Tomorrow, the court may speak of solemn justice in phrases copied from learned authorities. Then send a servant to your yard because a dead mule blocks the lane. The future may write more neatly, but it will still need someone to do what clean hands avoid. There is still room for disagreement about when the medieval executioner truly becomes the early modern professional executioner familiar from later German, French, and Central European records. Some historians see gradual continuity, with families, fees, and dishonour evolving over centuries. Others emphasize local differences, warning that famous later examples can make earlier life look more organized than it really was. The boundary is not a gate you pass through, it is fog over a road. You walk through it without knowing the name later, scholars will give the weather. The apprentice sits across from you and takes the repaired strap. He checks your stitching, perhaps a little too boldly. You let him. He finds no fault. That pleases him more than he wants to show. Outside, the evening bell rings. The sound rolls through the town as it did when you were a boy, as it did when your father stood where you stand, as it may when your apprentice grows old enough to avoid answering difficult questions directly. Bells survive reforms nicely. They do not care how the warrant was written. They call bakers, priests, widows, judges, thieves, children, and executioners alike, then leave everyone to pretend equality lasts after the echo fades. You step outside. The square beyond the lane glows with late light. New plaster on an old wall. Fresh paint on a sign. A different clerk at the court window. A young priest where an old one once stood. More paper, better seals, same glances. The town is changing. The fear is not, and you understand, standing there with leather oil on your hands. That history often moves like a cart through mud. The wheels turn, the load shifts, the driver curses. Everyone insists progress is being made. Yet the ruts remain, deep and familiar, holding the road in place long after the cart has passed. Darkness comes down gently, as if the town has finally run out of arguments. The last light leaves the roof lines first, then the church tower, then the upper windows of the better houses, then the muddy lane beyond your fence. Smoke rises straight for once, thin and blue against the evening, before it disappears into the larger dark. Somewhere a cart rolls slowly toward the gate. Somewhere a mother calls a child indoors. Somewhere in the tavern, men begin telling stories that will improve as the ale worsens. The square, which has held markets, gossip, judgment, fear, and mud enough for several lifetimes, settles into shadow. You return home with the tools, not from one great final execution, not from a thunderous closing scene arranged for poets and dramatic painters. No, the day has been smaller than that. A court errand, a repaired strap, a visit to the clerk, A dead dog removed from an alley because even after years of public punishment, the town still remembers you when something unpleasant needs moving. Heroic, not exactly necessary. Unfortunately, yes. The dog meets you at the gate and sniffs your boots. Your wife opens the door before you knock. Inside, the house smells of smoke, turnip broth, wool drying near the fire, and the faint herbal bitterness of yarrow hanging from a beam. The apprentice, now nearly a man in his own right, sits at the table mending a cord with calm fingers. The child, older too, reads marks from a scrap of church parchment by candlelight, lips moving silently. Everyone looks up when you enter, then returns to what they are doing. This is love in a practical household, not always embraces and speeches, sometimes only making room on the bench. You set the chest down. The familiar weight leaves your hands, but not entirely. It never leaves entirely. The body remembers what it has carried, even when the wood is on the floor. You unfasten the straps, open the lid, and begin putting things away for the night. Rope coiled, knife wrapped, whetstone dry, oil stoppered, cloth folded, buckles checked. Each object returns to its place with a small, soft sound. This is how the feared life ends most evenings. Not in flame, not in shouting, in sorting. A town executioner's work was rarely limited to the single public moment that later memory tends to magnify. The office could involve preparation, maintenance, travel, animal disposal, corporal punishment, prison visits, body handling, fees, side healing, and negotiations with officials. Public death made the reputation. Daily tasks sustained the office. The scaffold may be what everyone remembered, Zzdor, but the chest by your hearth tells a wider truth. A life is built from repetitions, even when the repetitions are dark. Your wife places a bowl before you. The broth is thin, but hot. Heat is its own feast. You wrap both hands around the bowl and let steam touch your face. The child asks whether the town was quiet today. You say quiet enough. Your wife gives you a look that means this is not an answer, but she allows it to stand. Some days are best folded away like old cloth, not hidden forever. Just put where they'll not trip everyone before sleep. The apprentice ties a practice knot without being told. You watch his fingers. The movement is smooth now. Cord around, under, through, pull, set, test. He's become good. You feel pride, and then the old grief attached to it. Pride and grief have shared a bench in your house for years, and neither has learned to move aside for the other. The boy can carry the craft. That means he may survive. It also means the town may one day turn its face from him the way it turned from you. He notices you watching. Too tight, he asks. No, you say, good. The word lands in the room quietly. It is not a grand blessing. It is not enough. It is still something. Outside, footsteps past the fence then fade. No knock tonight. That is a gift. The strange folklore surrounding your office will continue without your permission. Someone in town will swear a hangman's rope can cure fever. Someone else will say your shadow over a threshold brings bad luck. A third person will secretly hope your hands can set a bone better than the barber surgeon's. Some child will dare another child to touch your gate. Some mother will scold him, then later send for your wife when trouble comes. Your name will be a warning, a remedy, a joke, a curse, a necessity, depending on who speaks it and how badly they need you. No one owns their reputation completely, especially not you. There remains no single tidy answer to what life as a medieval executioner truly felt like. And perhaps that is fitting. Records preserve payments, titles, punishments, regulations, and occasional scandals. They let us glimpse families, privileges, exclusions, and fears. But the inner weather of the person who did the work is harder to catch. Was he numb, devout, resentful, proud, ashamed, practical, frightened, resigned? Any real man might have been all of those in 1 week. History often gives us the outline of a shadow and asks us not to mistake it for the whole body. You finish the broth, your wife takes the bowl and sets it beside the hearth. The child has fallen asleep with one hand still resting on the parchment scrap. The apprentice carries the tool chest to the shed. You follow him into the yard. The night is cold and clear. Above the town, stars have appeared, small and sharp as pinpricks in dark cloth. The church tower is only a shape now. The market square lies beyond the houses, empty, washed of faces. The scaffold is gone. The crowd is gone. The judge is asleep, probably without thinking of the man who made his sentence visible. The clerk's ink is dry. The baker's coins are counted. The priest's candle burns low. The town has placed each part of the day into its proper corner and called that peace. You slide the chest into the shed. The apprentice lingers. For a moment, neither of you speaks. He is tall enough now that the dusk makes him seem like your younger shadow. Or perhaps you're his older warning. The thought is not comforting, so you let it pass. At last he says, "Will they always fear us?" You look toward the fence, then the roofs, then the high, quiet stars. You could speak of changing laws, different towns, better luck, kinder neighbours. You could tell him fear grows tired eventually. You could say the world improves because people like saying that near children. Instead, you choose the answer that can survive the night. Some will, you say, some will need us more than they fear us. He nods. It is not much. It is the truth. Together you go back inside. The door closes. The latch settles. The fire has burned low, and the room glows with the calm red light of embers. Your wife has covered the sleeping child. The dog sighs beneath the bench, dreaming of whatever dogs dream in medieval towns. Probably bones, fields, and a society with fewer unnecessary rules. You sit near the hearth and stretch your hands toward the warmth. They are just hands, scarred, tired, washed, judged, useful, feared. The town may never believe that fully, but here, in the hush behind your own door, you can almost believe it yourself. Word count 1168, and now the town grows softer, the lanes empty one by one, and the last voices fold themselves behind shutters. The market square rests beneath the moon with no crowd to fill it, no bell to command it, no clerk to measure its meaning, only stones, puddles, straw, and the quiet memory of footsteps remain. Even the places that frighten people in daylight become simple shapes in the dark. A scaffold space becomes open ground, a prison wall becomes stone. A marked house becomes a home with a low fire and sleeping breath inside. You do not have to carry the chest any farther tonight. The tools are put away. The rope is still. The blade is wrapped. The ledger is closed. Outside, the cold presses gently against the door, but it cannot come all the way in. Inside. Embers settle deeper into ash, glowing and fading like a slow heart beneath the hearth. You breathe with the room, not as executioner now, not as symbol, rumour, warning, or shadow at the edge of the square, just as a tired person in a tired world, listening to the small sounds that prove the night is ordinary. Cloth shifting, wood clicking, a dog dreaming, someone turning in sleep. The town may wake tomorrow with all its judgments polished and ready, but tomorrow is not here yet. For now, there is only warmth, only darkness softened by firelight, only the old medieval roofs under the stars, the silent road beyond the gate, and the gentle thought that even feared lives contain bowls of broth, quiet hands, sleeping children, and moments when nothing more is required. So let the bells fall silent, let the market fade, let the long road disappear behind mist. You're safe outside the story now, drifting farther from the scaffold, farther from the square, farther from the cold old stones, until all that remains is a whisper of smoke, a low red glow, and sleep coming kindly through the dark. Sweet dreams.